Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the regular Board of Trustees meeting for May 23rd, 2023. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Parsbeck.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli.
Here.
Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Butler.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace will be absent this
All
evening.
right. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for anyone in the audience tonight to speak to anything that is not on tonight's agenda. We have Linda Wilson signed up. Linda, if you could state your address, please.
Yes. 1461 Merlette Street here in Bergen. And I do have two questions. The second part of it has to do with the design landscape guidelines that are new. Do you want me to hold those questions?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the one question I have is when I was reviewing our electric bill, there is a Berthoud City tax on that. And I was wondering why that is and what that money is used for.
I know very little about that. I know that we collect sales tax on phone bills and stuff. Is that also with electrical bills?
There are some taxes on utility bills that get remitted to the town. Is it an Excel or a Poudre Valley REA bill?
Poudre Valley REA.
I don't believe we have a franchise agreement with PVREA, and so it wouldn't be a franchise tax, which could be an additional tax on top of that. Those taxes get collected in the general fund. And they're just spent on general fund services, which, as you know, is administration, community development, parks, streets, all the general fund activities that we have.
I could talk to Cindy Leach, and I know we collect. I think it makes sense we're doing utility bills. Does it tell you a percentage on that?
No, it just gave an amount.
An amount.
And I didn't notice it before, and since, we're all watching our utility bills
Sure.
these days, and I always learn a lot when I come to these meetings, whether they're in person or in Zoom, and I really appreciate
Yeah,
getting that
certainly. Well, I need to know
information.
too, so I'll follow up with our finance director. I have your email and
Great,
I'll just copy the board.
thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak under public comment? All right. Next on our agenda is consent. Would trustees like anything removed from consent? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve consent?
I'll move to combine and approve the items in the consent
Is there
agenda.
a second?
I'll second.
All right, trustee Murphy has moved on consent. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Butler.
Yes.
Trustee Albright.
Yes.
Mayor Parsbeck.
Yes, thank you. Okay, first on our regular agenda is the Mental Health Awareness Proclamation. May is Mental Health Month. I'm on the Behavioral Health Policy Council for Laramie County, where we passed a new tax, I think 2 years ago. So we're pretty fortunate to have a mental health facility going in. I think it'll be done by August. I'm not positive by that yet. Okay. But it'll be a real, a good aspect for the county to be able to send people with going through a mental health crisis to a respective government facility. And it'll be ran by Summit Stone and some other mental health professionals. And obviously we have mental health and suicide issues across the nation, and Berthoud is not immune to that. And so I just wanted to make a proclamation for mental health awareness. And I'll start out. Whereas the area that someone lives and plays a significant role in their overall health and well-being, and whereas surroundings can impact if, how, and when a person's needs are met, which in turn affects mental health, and whereas having safe, stable, and healthy home conditions set the foundation for achieving and maintaining good mental health, and whereas with early and effective interventions, those individuals with mental health conditions can recover and lead full, productive lives, and whereas each business, school, government agency, healthcare provider, organization, and citizen share the burden of mental health problems and has a responsibility to promote mental wellness and support prevention efforts. Now therefore, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I, Mayor Parsbeck, do hereby proclaim May 2023 as Mental Health Month in the town of Berthoud. As the mayor of the town of Berthoud, I also call upon the citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools in Berthoud to recommit our community to increasing awareness and understanding of mental health, the steps our citizens can take to protect their mental health, and the need for appropriate and accessible services for all people with mental health conditions. Given under my hand in these free United States in the town of Berthoud on this 23rd day of May 2023, and to which I have caused the seal of the town of Berthoud to be affixed and have made this proclamation public. I'll sign it here. All right. Thank you, board, for being supportive of that. And we had 2 mental health suicide prevention trainings, and I wanted to thank New Freedom for opening up their facility recently for that, and having Larimer County, the LCSO there, and a co-responder. So it was really great to hear from them too. So thank you, everyone, and I hope to continue on having more of those trainings. Okay, next is HT Land Partners findings of fact concerning an annexation, and this will be introduced by our town planner, Ann Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor Karsbeck and members of the Town Board of Trustees. So tonight, what we are hearing is a finding of facts for the completeness and adequacy of the annexation application that's pending with us. So again, right now, this is a traditional slide that you all see during public hearings, just so that we can let the audience know where we are. We are at the application submittal phase. An annexation agreement is in the works of being discussed and agreed to. There's also a border little gap that needs to be annexed as well. So we're working through some of that. The applicant is really taking a proactive role at working through these issues. But tonight, we are just going to be discussing the fact that it does meet Colorado Revised Statutes Section 31, 12, 104, and 105. We are working through all those issues. We are not going to hear the annexation or the zoning request or the neighborhood master plan tonight. It's just asking you to adopt a resolution indicating that, you know, we are working through these processes. You still are in agreement that you would like to consider the annexation. It's not saying you will annex tonight or will agree to the zoning, but that we've just, there's a finding of fact that these 2 statutes have been met. And with that, that concludes the staff presentation.
All right. Didn't know if you were half joking, but that's pretty quick.
No,
All right.
completely serious. Do you have any questions?
Just for the audience, the 3-mile boundary, that would be, we call that a GMA, right? Is that the
Yes.
same thing?
Yep, that's the town of Berthoud's kind of their future land use map.
Trustees, questions? The applicant won't be up here tonight.
The applicant is here if you have any questions.
Do you have anything prepared you'd like to say? Okay, just here for questions. So I don't know if this is the time, but I guess I'll ask about the trail connection that was on the last one. It would be to work with the town on a trail connection across County Road 17. Is tonight the night to talk about that?
No, tonight all we're talking about is just agreeing that those 2 sections of Colorado Revised Statute have been met. The details of the annexation, the change of zone request, and then that neighborhood master plan or a concept plan will be presented at a future hearing, and that's where some of those details will be discussed.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, it's not a public hearing, correct?
Correct, it is on.
I'll open it up to the audience if there's anyone in the audience tonight that wishes to speak to this. All right, I'll close it, bring it back to the board. Trustees, any comments? You all feel pretty comfortable? Anyone would like to move on this?
I'll move to approve resolution 2023-12. A resolution regarding findings of fact for the annexation filed by HT Land Partners LLC.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, trustee Ayers has moved on this. Trustee Murphy has seconded. Is there any final discussion? Clerk, can we roll call vote, please?
Trustee Albright,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Trustee Butler,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. All right, thank you. Next is a Bader Farm PUD amendment and conditional use permit. This is a public hearing. Administrator Kirk, would you like to introduce this, or we'll go right? Okay.
We'll
tell
just
me.
turn it over to our Community Development Director, Ann Johnson,
All right.
if that's okay.
All right, Mayor Karspeck and members of the Town Board of Trustees. So tonight what we are going to hear, and I am not adept enough to talk and navigate the computer at the same time, so thank you, Christian. Thank you. There are going to be two requests. And both requests are on this parcel that you can see here. This is a snip from the Larimer County Assessor's website, and we know that the blue boundary that they show on the website isn't exactly aligned here with the actual parcel. It's close, you get an idea of where it is. It is just south of 287, and then it's west of South or North Berthoud Parkway. So tonight what you're going to hear is a request to amend a PUD. And the PUD isn't anything that the town has anymore in our land use process. And the only reason why they're asking to amend that PUD is to allow public facilities such as a fire protection district to be located on this property. And so that's the only reason. And the fire protection, if you approve that, the fire protection district would still need to go through a site plan process. It's not just a blanket saying, come and build whatever. They would still need to go through that site plan process, but it's just an allowance to contemplate that type of use on the property. So that's the only thing that will be amended, and Lauren from Baseline will go through the details of that. And then the second request then, the property was subdivided. A minor subdivision only goes to Planning Commission. And so the property, once that is recorded, will be now into two parcels. And on the westernmost parcel, the applicant is requesting a land use permit on that. So this overall presentation will be the only overall presentation you'll get, and then Baseline will make one presentation, but there are two requests. One is to amend the PUD, and the other is to allow a land use on the westernmost parcel. So in addition, tonight, there are some conditions of approval that we have been working with the applicant on, and it's not specifically called out very explicitly in the staff comments or reports or Planning Commission minutes. So I thought if you do vote to approve this evening, that these conditions might be nice to include in your motion. And I'll hand this out to you, and the applicant has a copy of this as well, so it's not a surprise. Pass those down. So this is a standard slide, and it's really meant for those that are unfamiliar with the town of Berthoud's land use process. But we do start with that pre-application phase, lots of meetings, many opportunities to ensure that the applicant understands what the expectations are for development. Once they are through that process, then there's that application submittal process and application review, lots of referral agency comments, opportunities to revise the application, make sure it's pretty squeaky clean before we bring it to Planning Commission and to you all. And then step 3 is where we are this evening at the public hearing. And then after this evening, depending on the outcome, there will be post-approval actions such as the conditions of approval, signing documents, recording, and then record management. So again, on this slide, this is where we are tonight. It was heard by the Planning Commission, and they did vote to send it to you with an approval on both the PUD amendment and the special use permit that you'll hear this evening. So this slide goes through kind of the outline of this evening. staff presentation. That's what's happening now, and Lauren Richardson will come up and she'll give a few more details that are site specific. And then the applicant has an opportunity to make a presentation. And then the hearing is opened for the public to comment. And then the public comment period then is officially closed, and then you all have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant, of staff, and then also to deliberate. And then with that, that closes the presentation on the process that will be this evening. And I do know Lauren Richardson from Baseline does have comments and a presentation on the details for both requests. But at this moment in time, do you have any questions regarding process? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. This is all connected. Is it connected? Yeah. Sorry, thanks.
Thanks, Anne. Good evening, Board of Trustees and Mayor Karspeck. As Anne mentioned, tonight we are going to be talking about the two applications for this property. I'd like to start with an overall aerial of this property from Google Earth, just kind of to show you the surrounding property and sort of the existing conditions. As Anne mentioned, the property is bounded by the Highway 287 on the northwest side, that big curve. And then we've got Berthoud Parkway coming down the east side. And the south, we've got the Hammond neighborhood and the Poudre Valley REA station right there. Oops. Wow, that was an accident. Okay. Here we've got the surrounding zoning. So as you can see, we've got the site outlined in purple, and it is surrounded by the PUD to the east and C2 to the north. We've got Ag and R3 to the west and north, and R1 and PUD to the south. And this photo is just showing a vacant property looking west from Berthoud Parkway to kind of show a little bit. And this site is not exactly flat as you would think from this image, just to let you know that. All right, and this is also looking west and just shows the existing access road along with the Hammond neighborhood on the left side and Poudre Valley REA site as well. So just a little info about the site. The applicant is BCM Management Partners LLC. There is a representative here tonight for if you have any questions later. The site is currently part of a planned unit development approved in 2007 called Bader Farm. The site is 7.44 acres in size, and the first application I'll discuss is the PUD amendment. The request by the applicant is an ODP amendment and an FDP amendment to modify allowed land uses. Along with the PUD amendment is a conditional use permit for a proposed storage facility on lot 1. This is just this was helpful for me since the PUD process, as Anne mentioned, is a little bit confusing and not all together. The review criteria are no longer there. So here are the 3 parts of the planned unit development, or PUD, as I will continue saying this evening. So the overall ODP, overall development plan, was required because there's an existing ODP approved in 2007. So therefore, we had the applicant modify that or amend it. The applicant was also required to submit an FDP amendment that requires more detail than an ODP. So that's the reason we had 2 very similar documents. All right. So at the top, we've got the original ODP in 2007. And as you can see, it's parcel 7 that the site is called. And the intended use is commercial. The uses allowed by right include office and retail uses, as permitted within the C2 zoning. Uses allowed by right include household and commercial mini storage facilities. At the bottom, outlined in red, we have the amendment to the ODP, proposing adding government facilities as permitted under location and extent process or similar, i.e. fire station. Okay. Included in the PUD amendment, both the FDP and ODP, are proposed zone district standards. So for parcel 1, parcel 2, and suburban commercial. So parcel 1 and 2 have front setbacks of 20 feet, side setbacks of 20 feet, rear setbacks of 20 feet, and a building height maximum of 40 feet. In comparison, the suburban commercial district, which the site is identified as in the comp plan, has setbacks that are 10, 10, and 10. The applicant, as I mentioned, submitted both the amended ODP and FDP to ensure that both steps of the PUD are followed. Since this was an amended PUD, not creating a new PUD, a PDP was not required. The FDP shows more detail, so it requires a drainage report and a final subdivision plat, both which were submitted by the applicant and reviewed by all Town of Berthoud staff and Planning Commission. Right. As mentioned in the staff report, the Town of Berthoud Code does not include criteria for PUDs anymore. Therefore, we use the final plat criteria to review, since both final plats and PUDs require similar submittal items. The review criteria listed here were used to review the PUD amendment, which includes the ODP amendment and the FDP amendment. Staff found that this application did fulfill the first review criteria. It did not drastically change the proposed plat or the allowed density. It is in conformance with this code. It doesn't have significant changes to street alignment or access points or public improvements. The proposed PUD amendment is in conformance with the previously approved Bader ODP. The second criteria were fulfilled because it did not propose any change that would contradict the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Plan or the Berthoud Trails Master Plan. Third criteria has been met. The town's Public Works Department and engineers have reviewed this application, and they did not find any conflicts. As Ann mentioned, the Plan Commission has sent their recommendation of approval to the Town Board of Trustees for Bader Farm Amendment Number 1, PUD amendment for consideration. And the proposed motions are on the slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're good? Do we have one from the
Yes.
applicant?
Yeah, well, that was the end of the first. And should they do the motions now, or is that at the end?
That'd probably be at the end. It's a public hearing.
Yeah, my apologies.
No, you're fine.
Because
No worries.
it's different with planning commission.
Yeah, so I would suggest that you hear the amendment to the PUD. And then once you finish that discussion, then Lauren can give just a very brief presentation then on this special use permit.
And then vote on both.
And then you can, I would vote on the amendment to the PUD first and then the special use permit second. It really is also up to you all if you would just rather see the whole presentation now, because it gives a good idea of
I think
the
that makes,
entire project.
that's all right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely. I will continue. The next application is the conditional use permit / use by special review application. Before I start, I want to make sure everybody knows that the code uses both terms to describe this process. So we're going to be interchanging some of those for this particular presentation. The conditional use permit is for Lot 1, which is 5.73 acres in size. The request is for the approval of a conditional use permit for commercial indoor mini storage facility. This is an overall site plan for the property for the best box storage facility. So you can see there is the lot 2 for the fire station and the subdivision that was approved. And we can come back to this slide if we need to. Comprehensive plan and the future land use map identify this area as suburban business place type character district. The preferred land uses for this character district include retail stores, lodging, services, restaurants, and offices. Low to moderate intensity is preferred. The general scale recommended is up to 3 stories. One area the conditional use permit looks at is parking. Due to the nature of the use, The majority of the parking is located inside the building. The intent of the use is to drive into the building. There are two, the striped access aisles right there that provide a minimum of 10 parking spaces. There are 8 exterior parking spaces, one of which is ADA van accessible. Here's a rendering that shows some parking on the building. It also shows a little bit of the architecture and the landscape buffer, which we will talk about in a minute. The facility is to be a 3-story climate-controlled facility, a leasable storage space of approximately 83,000 square feet. The site plan places the building at its closest dimension 65 feet from the southern property line, so that just shows how far it is from that southern property line there. The recommended setback for a standard C2 zone district is 35 feet from a residential zoning district. Here we have the whole landscape plan. Per section 30-2-114, the applicant has included an evergreen berm/buffer identified in green, just to call that out, along the southern boundary with the Hammond neighborhood. Due to an existing utility easement containing a water line, a landscape buffer begins 25 feet inside the property line identified in yellow, just further showing the distance between the Hammond neighborhood and this facility. Here's a rendering that shows the southern boundary landscaping, which I mentioned earlier. So nice evergreen buffer right there. The conditional use permit has 7 criteria that the applicant must satisfy. The first has been satisfied as it conforms to the code. Commercial zone districts permit mini storage only with the approval of conditional use permit. No variance is being requested. Engineering and infrastructure standards were used during the design and were reviewed by staff. The second requires the applicant to conform to the comprehensive plan. The proposed structure fits the recommended 3-story building scale consistent with this character district. The applicant followed the architectural guidelines as much as possible. They have added a 6-foot sidewalk along the frontage of Lot 1 to conform to the Berthoud Trails master plan. The third has been satisfied as the use will be adequately served by public utilities. The majority of the landscape and open space areas are considered low hydrozone areas, meaning that they require low amounts of water. The fourth is consistent with the comp plan and the future land use map. They have included a landscape buffer, as I mentioned. The 5th criterion has been satisfied since traffic will not have a significant adverse impact on adjacent uses or result in hazardous conditions. The paved drive aisle is large enough for two-way traffic and emergency vehicles. Vehicle access is limited to internal loading areas and will be secured by an access pad and limited to customers only. The 6th criterion has been satisfied with the necessary landscape buffer, the location of the building, and its proposed setbacks. The facility's daily operations will not produce substantial noise. The operating hours are from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. There will be 24-hour video monitoring of 25 security cameras and an on-site facility manager and district manager. The applicant has chosen light fixtures that meet the international dark sky standards and submitted a photometric plan that showed no light trespass onto neighboring properties. The final seventh criterion has been satisfied. The applicant is aware that all applicable permits will need to be submitted to the town of Berthoud prior to construction. The Planning Commission has sent their recommendation of approval to the Town Board of Trustees for the Berthoud self-storage use by special review for consideration. And those motions are on the slide as well. Apologies for that mix-up earlier.
No, you're fine.
And that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Trustees, do we have any questions?
I have a couple.
Great.
The PUD was approved in 2007, and the special use was approved at the same time, correct?
Actually, the PUD, the original PUD, is a separate entity, so it's a separate application. And that was approved in 2007, like you mentioned, yes. But the use by special review is what they are here tonight asking for the mini storage on
Okay,
lot one.
So it wasn't that because it's changing from a PUD to a different district type that they're trying to get the special use rolled over. This is a new
No.
request.
It's a new request. Currently the site is vacant and all mini storage within the town of Berthoud, per the town code, is required to go through a conditional use process.
And I guess, I don't know, this might be for Administrator Kirkin, I don't know if you know this, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but some of the comments that I got were concerned about the height. How tall is the fire station that we have? 20 feet? 30 feet?
You're right, I do not know that question.
I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't have an exact height, but we're probably under 25.
25 feet?
25 feet from the firefighter?
Okay, that's all I had for now, thank you.
Okay. Any
We can
trustees,
get
any-
that answer for you exact. if you'd like to.
I don't need it exact, I was just trying to figure out, sightlines, if the proposed fire station is in front of it, what's that gonna do for the sightline to the taller building behind it? Thank you.
Trustees, other questions for baseline staff?
Well, I have one, in regards to the height, I was wondering, so I mentioned that this land use would, under the special permit, allow up to 3 stories. What is that height for 3 stories?
I believe it is 40 feet? Yeah, it's 40 feet.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Is the building,
Confirm.
yeah, 3 stories.
So the mini storage would be approximately up to 40 feet,
Yes.
fire might be 25, 30, so it'd be probably a little shorter. Okay, that's one question I have.
Are we getting, you gave a great presentation. Is the applicant want to present?
Yes.
Like in South Coffee, yeah. David, do you want to?
Yeah.
Gentlemen, if one of you could just state your company name and address, that'd be appreciated.
Okay, my name is David Cheknova. I am the member manager of the landowner of this property, and we've owned it since 2006. And I'm here to just introduce the project and give a little past history, so hopefully a lot of questions can be answered that's going around. So I am not the developer, but I'm here to introduce how this fire station and storage project developed and it
Sure.
came to you guys today.
Do you by chance know the address of your firm?
Yes, my address is 8687 Morton Road, Niwot.
Thank you.
And so my name is David Cheknova, Chaknova. I have been a developer in Colorado, especially Longmont, and did a lot of commercial in Longmont. In 2006, I was approached to look at this beautiful land of my Berthoud with view of Long's Peaks and these lakes. And I just couldn't believe what I saw. And the people that brought me to this property owned 700 of the other acres, the Grant family, who I've known for a long time. And they were selling the 700 acres to John Turner and Jim Birdsall to do the development. They didn't know they were gonna have a golf course then. So we went ahead and basically did an exchange, and I purchased the property, and we formed a partnership to own this property. We didn't expect it to own it for 17 years, but we sold off 124 acres to the Fairgrounds Business, can't read anymore, LLC, which I think was Birdsall and John Turner. And we sold that to them in 2016 or 15. So that comprised about 700 acres they purchased before from my partners, and 124 which they needed because we had those beautiful views of where the clubhouse is, and we own the property up on top there, and it was just fabulous. To answer a question that came up earlier about the PUD, I believe that was done in 2007, and I believe that when we did this PUD, that Birdsall assisted us with the PUD at that time, and that was a long time ago. I may be not correct, but I'm pretty sure he assisted us, or we used his skills in knowing Berthoud and at that time. We kept 25 acres of commercial, where you see the Starbucks and soon the McDonald's will break ground and the Come and Go. We sold that land to another developer to do the commercial project. We had interest from Starbucks and all those folks, but we decided not to put a shovel in the ground and sell it to a pretty good developer who finalized the deals with these retailers. And I was in the Starbucks last 2 weeks ago, and it was very busy. And so I hope that's a good project for you guys. I talked to Chris the other day about some landscaping that has either died or hasn't been up to what we would call finished product. And I have now made a contact to the people in charge of that project to pick it up. So you guys don't have to enforce any of your codes, and they said they'll do that. So Chris, that's hopefully it gets done. When we had the land that's being considered today was a problematic parcel. It had an easement with the aerial overhead electrical lines and the access. And when we sat down with the town several times on this property and some of the other stuff, we knew that we could not put a Burger King there or a commercial use that was gonna need a lot of traffic. The traffic for that intersection had to be low impact. We could have never, I've done enough development, I got the gray hair. I know we would have never passed a traffic study for that intersection, especially with the future uses as Berthoud Parkway and stuff grows. So we knew we had to bring in low traffic generators. The storage development project, we had several storage people, we had car businesses, a car lot user. We had lots of people wanting to go on that site, but we had to be very picky on who we went there because I have a 100% approval rate in every project I've ever done in my life, and that's a lot of them. And I hope we get that here today, but it's from being picky, getting the right developer, knowing the town, knowing the codes, knowing the traffic, knowing the concerns of neighbors, all that stuff. And I'll address a little of that here too today. So the developer doesn't have to. So we found we had several commercial or storage users that were interested. We picked this group because our broker had a relationship with them doing other deals, and he said that they do it right. And that meant a lot to the grants. We live in the Longmont area, so we are very concerned on every community I've ever done development in, I'm concerned. This developer was working on his plans, had submitted some plans to the town, and then we got a call from the fire district. And the fire district was interested in looking for a parcel near the Heron Lakes commercial. And I said, wait a second, we have a parcel that I think you could go next door to in the storage. So I called up the storage developer, and this is again working with a good developer. I said, hey, you have an extra 2.3 acres there. Can we use that for a fire station? And he said, wow, what a great use. And that's been the attitude he's had all along. So we had to amend our contract with them to give them another 6-8 months because the fire station needed to catch up with their plans and their design, and they had to co-design this together, and he had to go spend more money with engineers. and we gave them more time. And so it was really a collaboration, and the town, they were working with the town officials. It was really a collaboration with the town planners, with a fire station representatives that were really, once they got on board, they really were on board. And the developer who supported the time and the extra expense to do all this. On top of that, I asked a favor of the storage developer, who I've never met before except one time. I mean, I said, can you give the land to the fire district? And he said, can we have them pay for the pro rata share? We'll develop the site and they'll pay their pro rata share, bringing in the water and sewer and the grading. I said, absolutely, they'll do that. But can we not charge them for the land? He goes, absolutely, it'll be a good community effort. That's what we have here. So from that going forward, the fire district has done their job in getting caught up to get with Bo, who you're gonna meet in a second. And it's been a benefit for the town having a fire district near a golf course. I don't golf a lot, but my friends do. And I remember all the time they hear about an ambulance or somebody either has breathing problems or heart attack or something happens on a golf course, having a fire station, not only in the immediate residences all around the area, having a fire station that close to residences, but also the public golf course. What a concept. So it's a win-win. Also, there were concerns. There were 3 or 4 letters that were written last year. There was one person that showed up at the neighborhood meeting, and their concern is the usual stuff: traffic, crime. Okay, let's address those. This is a storage unit that is self-contained. It is highly electronic, state-of-the-art. It has the most modern security, and it's not the type of storage facility from what we think of 10 years ago or 15 years ago, where you drive up, roll up your little door, and people are making meth labs in there and doing all that stuff. These are not those type of things. These are high-end, sophisticated storage. They're gonna cater to the market that is happening in wealthier areas, and there is a lot of wealth coming to Berthoud with around the lake and other homes that are being built where people want climate controlled storage for their stuff. So that being said, the crime aspect also goes out the picture. The concerns are real, but it's not gonna happen because, number one, these type of facilities you can't get into. It's not like busting down a door or breaking a lock where you can't get in without the code. So 2, you have to drive by the fire station to get to the storage. So only a police station would be better to have next door to this storage for any potential crime. So this type of facility is not the type of thing where kids are drinking or smoking dope in the back of a storage. They can't get in, and they have to go by a fire station. The fire station's gonna have cameras. They're gonna see the cars. This storage facility will have cameras everywhere. Anybody that's thinking of doing bad stuff is not gonna touch. They'll go somewhere else, but they're not gonna go to this place. The next concern is traffic, and I touched on it. And I know I've had conversations with the planner and Chris about the traffic for the site. And the number one commercial use for least traffic, according to all the codes and everything, is storage. It generates the least traffic imaginable for commercial zoning. A residential house will do 10 to 12 trips per day. If you have a kid or two with it's in high school, and the mother and father, it's about 10 to 12 trips a day. So it's even less use than residential use. But this type of use of all commercial uses between the fire station and the storage, doesn't generate traffic, and that's why the town is supportive of it. I think the planning commission did a really good job. They did ask the developer to beef up his landscaping, and he's agreed to do that, and he'll talk about that. So all that being said, the residents of Berthoud are traveling to Johnstown. The storage, 85% occupancy is really 100% because the turnover is so rampant. So 85% is a very successful storage unit. The units that, according to the studies, are showing in the 90s and up to 95% occupancy level in Johnstown and Berthoud. So if that's true, then there's a desperate need for storage. And according to friends that I have, like 4 friends out on the Heron that have houses that are built on the golf course project, they all are renting in Johnstown because in a climate controlled, and they would rather be close to their house. So there's a need for it. It's a higher end storage. It's not cheap storage. So I think the concerns of the crime, I think are self-explanatory to most people, that it really won't be a problem, and your neighborhood A&W may have a bigger problem than this project with the fire station next door. Traffic generators, you can talk to your planners if you have any other questions, and Bo can address it a little more than I am. I'm not here to present the project. I just wanted to present the history. In all, it's a win for the town. It's a win for the residential neighbors. It's a win for the fire department, and it's a win for the storage developer to have a fire department next to them. It's a win, 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 win. And so that being said, if anybody has any questions, if not, I'll sit back and enjoy the show. One last thing is it's the first time I've seen the rendering. And I was sitting next to the gentleman here with the fire department. I said, it looks like an office building, first class office building. So I was really impressed when I saw this rendering. And that's my only last thing. That doesn't look like storage to me. And I've only seen a couple of these since they started making these, because I never know they're a storage facility unless I see the sign out front. I would never know that's a storage. So that being said, does anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Sam, if you could please state your name and address.
Bo Reinberg, 7018 Maryland Avenue, St. Louis, Missouri. I have to say that having a developer open up for another developer, I really feel a very positive vibe. Normally, we don't get such accolades. I want to say first that the staff through the entire process has been incredibly professional, and I really appreciate the detail that they go into. Certainly for the folks that haven't had as much experience with it, understanding where everything is in the process. I do a lot of these meetings. We develop in 8 different states. And I will say it's really beneficial for residents and the public as they watch the meeting. So I commend you for that. Appreciate your time tonight. As David said, we're very excited about the opportunity to develop a facility, a Class A facility in Berthoud. We feel strongly that there's an unmet need for this type of self-storage facility. Not the self-storage facility of 20 years ago that's oftentimes chain link and barbed wire. This is a Class A facility. 100% of the units are climate controlled, and 100% of the units are accessed from an interior drive. Those 2 elements alone make this less than 2% of the facilities in the United States are built to these standards. I mean, this is really a Class A product that we feel like the immediate residents as well as residents from other communities will benefit from. And we talk a lot about the residential customers, which are obviously really key and core to our business. But I will say that over the past 5 years and really even more so post-COVID. The small business customer is now almost 30% of our customer base. It's a lot of businesses that are running either through the internet or, they've downsized their office space so that they can, they don't have as many trips to the office, but they still have a need for inventory, paperwork, backup, et cetera. Especially in the world of inventory control, having the ability to kind of right-size your inventory based upon supply chain constraints is really important for small and mid-sized businesses of all types. So as Berthoud and the county grow, our use, we feel, is a real attribute to that. To touch on a few of the points that came up, obviously landscaping is very important to us. We're not gonna spend the money that we do on a facility of this nature and not make the first impression completely first class. And that goes from as soon as they see us to when they're pulling in to when they're pulling out, and that starts with landscaping and ends with landscaping. So it's really a priority for our business. On a security side, I just want to echo David's comments about, security is really kind of 1 and 2 with safety and security for our customers is the most important thing. Every customer that goes in there, whether it's at 7:30 in the morning or 8:30 in the evening, have to feel safe and secure, because that's when that will keep them as a customer. That's the differentiating factor between other storage facilities that are of an older generation. The entire family doesn't feel safe there. And we want the entire family to feel safe because we want that customer to stay for as long as possible. So those are just 2 things. And, finally, to be able to have the fire district collaborate with us on this parcel and on this development, we really feel like is a great match with 2 uses that don't generate a lot of traffic, but need access to the roadways, need visibility. You really couldn't put 2 uses in a commercial intersection together that are any better than a use like the fire district and a self-storage use. The other nice thing for the residential next to us is that we've done this in other developments where a use like ours that's very low impact, low to no noise, acts as a great buffer between the higher intensity traffic and intersection uses and commercial uses to the residential. So you've got residential behind us that now will have a nice landscape buffer as well as the property buffer to the intersection at Berthoud and 287. So we feel like a lot of the aspects of the goals for this development are being met with what we're proposing. And we look forward to any questions that you all might have.
All right, thank you very much. Questions, Trustee? Trustee Hardy?
Curious to know if you've ever built these as a 2-story building. Does it have to be 3?
For the square footage that we need for the feasibility of the project, this one has to be 3 stories.
So that 3-story building is gonna be at least 40 feet tall?
I think the top of the parapet, it won't exceed 40 feet because it can't. So the top of the parapet will be probably in that 39 to 40, yeah.
So it's gonna be at least, how tall is a 2-story house, about 30, 35 feet?
Yeah, top of a gable, yeah, I think, a 2-story house the floors are usually 11, 22, so with a pitched roof, you're probably in the 30 to 32.
I'm just thinking, these are gonna be like the mothership on 287.
I'm sure I was supposed to probably go through a presentation. I'm pretty known for kind of freestyling, so.
My name is Michael Cleary. I'm with Strategic Site Design. We're the civil consultant that have been helping on this project
Sir, what's your business address?
We operate out of 88 Inverness Circle East in Inglewood.
Thank you.
Much of this has already been covered by my predecessor, so and by Lauren, who's done a great job. We have added to here some additional detail that came out of the discussions and questions at the planning commission that I think are worth pointing out that that toward your question about the building height, this site is difficult to understand from the photographs that you've seen, but has significant grade change from the east to the west and a high point there, some 25 feet of elevation change. And this building, as big as it is on a relatively flat slab, is cut into that slope. And the benefit of that is that there is natural grade hiding the lower portion of this building. So especially from the north and west, where 287 sits beneath this site. And
Gonna become my next question was like, could you somehow, since there's not really a floodplain in that area, is there a possibility to lower it so it doesn't seem to be as tall?
Yeah, we have it as low as feasible in order for the stormwater features to function. There is at the east end of the property a stormwater management.
It's a unique property because of the shape of it, so you've got a 5 acre I mean, normally a building of this size and our use would be on a 2 acre parcel, so it'd be a much smaller parcel. Which there's pluses and minuses, but when you have that much green space, stormwater and how we manage that becomes really critical to the project, especially when you have a drive-in facility that's on different grades. It really it becomes a challenge that we gotta get the water in the right places, right? And so the teardrop feed, the way that the lot kind of comes into a point becomes less and less usable because of the setbacks and because of the grade. But that space, which is probably almost 2 acres, that all has to kind of work itself into the right stormwater design. So that kind of, you hear a 7 acre site or a 5 acre site and you think there's a lot of room to spread out, but when you have these sites that are up against a major roadway like this and have the setbacks and the topography that they do, it really shrinks it down quite a bit.
No, I'm just thinking about all the other buildings in the area. Nothing compares to this size building, and it's just gonna stand out. It's gonna look like a baseball stadium in the middle of a neighborhood. So,
Question?
but the other question I had is also about security. Is there a gate into this property that prevents them from getting in around the building or back into the green area that kind of looks like a park? And if not, is there gonna be security monitoring back in those open spaces to make sure that, they may not be able to get into the building, but what's gonna prevent them from hanging out in the green space in the park area that's back in there?
Yeah, so we have cameras on the exterior of the building that look for all of that. The access is controlled through a keypad so that the door opens, you enter into the building with your vehicle, door closes behind you and you exit out.
But the drive around this apron is all gonna be open public?
That's open, that's for the fire, that's a life safety requirement, so you can drive all the way around the building.
Not right now.
On the Berthoud Parkway side, is that sidewalk done all the way to the lights?
the sidewalk is required for the portion that being presented today is for the portion that is going to be the property on which the storage facility is. And then when the site plan is presented for the fire station, that would be extended.
Okay, so I guess where is the, right, that's the one I'm asking to get done, but they're saying proposed today. Where's the one proposed today?
This portion along the southeast corner there, adjacent to the green landscape area. I don't have a cursor.
It's the white square, third white square from the bottom on the right hand side is proposed sidewalk.
Yeah, so the fire station lot,
They'll be doing theirs.
they'll have to do theirs as part of their site development.
Yeah,
I
so
see.
so along this area will be a sidewalk and landscape buffer behind it.
Any thoughts of like a sidewalk or a crushed refined trail on the north end by the landscaping between 287?
That would be either a requirement of the fire station if they purchase the lot or a requirement of the town, but not of this developer under the way our standards are written. We have had conversations about trying to work to connect the south piece adjacent to the power substation.
Mhm.
That is actually, it's kind of an odd deal, but I don't believe that section of road in front of the power station was ever annexed into the town. It's a weird gap. So Keith Knoll, our Public Works Operations Manager, has been working with the county on correcting, we've got 4 or 5 of those spots in town where there's these weird little orphaned street sections in town. But we, with our road impact fees, can widen the road and putting curb gutter and sidewalk along that stretch adjacent to the substation.
Thanks, that's all my questions. Anything else? Trustee Murphy?
Yeah, just taking a brief look at the plans, I didn't see dimensions of the actual structure. Were those on there? I think the width, I guess, is what I'm looking at.
They are not on this, but it is 250 feet long. And 130, I think, feet wide.
And then the other question I had, there was some discussion with the planning commission about, doing something along the lines of public art, to kind of mitigate the size and impact of the structure. I know berming and landscaping is our usual go-to. Would you entertain any kind of like graphic art or mural on the north facade as like an alternative to that, or not really?
I mean, I would say we're all ears for collaborating to make it look nice and make it something that represents the town well, and it's always a fine line with art because some people like it, some people, you get a lot of opinions about art, right? And I think there's a lot of artists around here, so. Well, all I would say is that we are completely on board with figuring out how that could work. And as far as in that grass area, we would have no issue with allowing some sort of easement for art to be placed there or anything of that nature. I mean, I would say that we're somewhat limited just economically by what we can do with the facade and contributing the art ourselves. I'm not much of an artist, but my 8-year-old might be. But so I guess my answer is, if there's a way that it can work, we're on board. I do want to say though, we again walk a fine line between not looking like a storage facility, but people knowing that it's a storage facility, right? So that's important for our business. We have to be thoughtful and conscious about that, because the reality is that most people identify storage because of those garage doors. That's what they identify: orange, green, yellow, that's their go-to. And so by not having any of those visible, it's really important for us to make a structure that people notice, that we can easily direct people to through, if we're chatting with them online, if we're on the phone with them. So we like to stand out and be noticeable in a good, appropriate way. And if we can incorporate some things with the town with that, we're completely on board.
I don't know if you've been around town, some of the examples are like on the elevator, or on the sides of some of the buildings, it's more of kind of agricultural or natural kind of honoring themes. Is that something? of
Absolutely.
interest? Okay. Okay.
I think to that point, it's worth pointing out that the area that was discussed for that application actually lies on lot 2. And would probably need to be a discussion, correct me if I'm wrong, Ann, as part of that site plan review. In response to that discussion, we did increase the buffer density or plant density of the portion that is on the property up for review today. And this is the highlighting the additional 17 trees that were added to kind of fill in some of the gaps that were there.
Yeah, so it's
along-
one of those situations where if we wanna use that open area for some sort of canvas, for some attention, we don't wanna plant trees so it can't be noted, right? So it's, I think our take is we're, as we've been, I think, the entire time, trying to be collaborative and say, you know, we'd love to make it work so that it's pleasing to, you know, the folks driving by for sure.
And the discussion about the art was sort of centered around the corner here, which, given the shape of this lot, it should, you know, present space that would otherwise be unusable for the fire station. So whether it be an easement that needs to be granted, they have always been open to having that discussion and setting aside that what's needed. And I think Ann has you know, a condition for approval that can be considered to continue to work on solving that desire.
Other questions?
Follow up, yeah.
I was just curious if we're gonna hear from the fire department as to their intent and desire for this property as part of this presentation.
Part of the presentation, I don't know, but they could probably speak under public comment. Administrator Kirk?
I don't know if they're planning to speak as part of the presentation, they certainly could, or
could,
if you want to just ask them questions, I'm sure that's probably fine too.
Anything else for the developer applicants while we have them up here?
I have a question to staff first. With this being a special, we're looking at a couple things here. How specific, I'm just curious, how specific should we be thinking through the finer details of the site plan, landscaping, parking, traffic, or just more for just the permanent use of the storage facility?
I think my suggestion to you would be that the ideal place for the board to focus would not be on like, you know, tree species and parking lot layout. Some of those are technical issues that we just worked through during the site plan approval process. Instead, it would be, you know, if you're concerned about specific impacts with the project, trying to identify those and be specific so that we can mitigate those through that approval, or a condition to mitigate a certain impact that the board might see that that might need special attention. To me, that would be a better use of your time and energy rather than like the architecture or site planning.
Okay.
Kind of technical details.
That's what I was thinking, because I've got a whole slew of, you know, detailed questions that we could spend all night, and I don't want to do that. The one I do have is, I guess, parking. It appears to be very minimal, parking, at least outside the building. Can you just elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, I mean, generally our facilities have 3 parking spaces because most 98% of the people that are coming to a facility are parking to load and unload, and all of that occurs in the interior of the building. So it's a big drive-through in the building, and there's areas off to the side where they park to load and unload. So it's a kind of an active loading area. As far as customers, I mean, a busy storage facility gets 6 new customers on a Saturday, spread out over 8 hours. So, you know, storage facilities just don't require kind of office parking. You know, it's usually a parking spot for the manager, and then 2 or 3 spaces for customers, and then an ADA space.
Okay.
Many jurisdictions, or few jurisdictions, have applicable parking standards specific towards storage. And applying any warehouse or commercial parking standard would far exceed what's warranted. There are some that have begun to establish use-specific parking standards, and we referenced those in setting parking standards in the FDP and ODP process. And so as part of that submittal, there is parking standards set that are consistent with the city of Denver, I think Adams County, where we referenced those use-specific standards in creating a minimum for this location. In Denver's is one space for a tenth of a space for every 1,000 square feet of gross leasable area, which worked out to be, I think in this case, 14 spaces. And so we have allotted the 6 spaces outdoors, and then we counted for, there's some 400 linear feet along in the loading areas along each side of the interior drive aisle. And so conservatively, we've accounted for 10 spaces inside without remotely being congested or blocking the uses indoors to exceed that number based on the 1/10 per thousand.
Okay. And then my final question is, I think you touched on it a minute ago. Did I understand you correctly that there is no fencing or gates around this property site?
That's right.
Okay, that's all I have.
Yeah, I mean, if there were units accessible from the exterior, that's when we would incorporate a fence or gate of some sort. But the entrance is your gate because you have to key code in. And so it really is, fences to me don't look great all the time, especially when you can accomplish it through landscaping and berms and when you have an all interior building. Even a nice fence, it opens itself up to weather and the elements, and with the structure of a facility, it would be redundant.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I got one more, just 'cause I saw it on the slide. So the proposal on the south I saw was gravel. On the north too, you guys are proposing gravel underneath the trees?
Say that again?
On the landscaping to the north of the facility, if you go back one more slide. It was just up, with the site, it looked like you guys had gravel on the north end, up to the road. Is that correct, or did I see that wrong?
No.
Okay. All right, well, let's solve that. Thanks. All right, anything else? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
With the fire, sorry, I don't know your rank. Would you have anything to add if you'd like? Trustee Sorcelli was asking.
I can, yeah. I was just gonna wait for public comment.
Okay, that works great. Yeah, that'll be next.
I do have some specific questions for the fire department. if
Okay,
that's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Gonna bring any digital, but I got a couple of renderings I can show you.
All right. If you could state your name and address.
Lyle Fitterson, 275 Mountain Avenue with the fire district.
Thank you.
So Chief Charles wasn't able to be here tonight, so I'm here representing the fire district and of course in support of the project. Really just to provide you guys with some information and hopefully answer any questions you have, and if I can't, then I will try to find the avenues to get those for you guys. So as you all know, with the amount of development and growth that's going on up north, we've done a station deployment study, and so this is a great property for that, to keep us within national standards for fire departments, engine companies, and support companies. So, and working with the applicant and the developer, this piece of land has become very attainable for the fire district. So this is really an ideal location for us. And so, let me see here. A couple of national standards, if you all know, but with the amount of commercial growth that's going into, there's the insurance service office that this will provide better insurance rates for properties up at that end of town for us. So A couple of renderings, I'll show you, we don't have a set site plan, but this is just a, I don't know if it helps to put it north or,
Yeah, why?
so north would be Berthoud Parkway, 287, and drive-through bays, which we've used, modern fire station development. So this is ideal. Neither one of our stations now have this, but fire and EMS. So we're looking at working cooperatively with Thompson Valley EMS as well, to provide them a location. So, but it's going to be one building. It will be divided as far as fire and EMS. And then I'll hold up this picture here too. I feel like I should bring a thumb drive next time. So anyways, that's just kind of a rendering, that's a preliminary rendering for what we've got now. So Chief Charles is very well versed in everything that's happening, and so he probably would have a lot more answers than I've got, but I'm open to questions.
And I would say the fire district too, they were at the neighborhood meeting that we hosted and sent out invitations for their present at that with the renderings and to answer any questions. Obviously at planning and zoning, we're also in attendance to ask any questions, so a lot of support both ways.
Yeah, my specific questions, that rendering is like jewel worthy though. That's so cool, that fire station. But my question is about ISO. And if I recall, it was like a 7-mile radius that the ISO would affect if we have a station out there. And it's been a hot minute since I've been at the fire station. But I remember that as what I recall, we needed a fire station up north to kind of close some gaps for the ISO rating.
Yes.
And so would that effectively help lower that class rating to the two?
We're just on the border there of the, well, it used to, ISO's kind of dynamic, but 5 to 7 mile driving radius from station one, but we're kind of exceeding now that 5 mile. I haven't driven it myself, but this is what I understand, this is ideal location for a 5 mile radius. So with McDonald's and Starbucks and all the other commercial that may go in that area, this north of 287 there, this will definitely put them, that's outside of station one's parameters right now, but this station will put them inside the parameters to lower those insurance rates.
And how many engine bays or units can be housed there? Do we know?
It looks like here we've got 4 bay spaces. So, well, ideally this would be the primary response apparatus, and we'd leave this bay open so that it can drive through. That's just ideal, so we're not backing into small bay spaces like we currently do with some of the firehouses we have. So, and then of course you can see the ambulance, there's 4 in the ambulance bays.
That's awesome.
So,
How many calls do you guys project from that station, or do you know?
well, we're, as a district,
I'm thinking about the traffic, just to tie this in.
Yeah.
How many trucks would be going in and out in a day?
some quick math, we're probably averaging 7 to 8 calls a day in the district, and that's 2 firehouses already, so a third house. You divide that up, it's not gonna be very busy initially, but as things grow, it just continues. So we're right at that brink for national standards for fire deployment.
And the fire department and the storage unit will be sharing the same exit and
Yes.
entrance onto Berthoud Parkway?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all.
Any questions for fire?
This is the architecture firm you guys are working with, you know?
It might be on the board there.
I'm just curious, I didn't see it on the board.
I don't have that answer for you right
It's
now, I'm
on
sorry.
No worries.
I've heard it, it's not.
You'll remember as soon as you walk in the
Yeah.
door tonight.
Yeah.
Anything else for
Charles
fire?
is texting you right now.
Yeah, I know, no service in this place.
All right, looks like we don't have any more questions. Thank you very much. Thanks for bringing those too. Okay, if nothing else, at this time I'll open it up to public comment, or the public hearing portion. If anyone in the audience here wishes to speak to this, we don't have any signed up. Is there anyone that didn't have a chance to sign up that wishes to speak to this? All right, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for deliberations and possibly a vote. How does everyone feel?
My biggest concern is just the massive size of the building. I'm trying to think of how many other buildings we have in town that would compare to this, and there's not one at all. To me, I picture this to be about the same size as like the Jack's Outdoor or Home Depot up in Loveland.
Home Depot is significantly larger on a square footage basis. It wouldn't be anywhere near that size.
No, you're talking about height.
Maybe height, but certainly not building footprint. Yeah. TPC Colorado Clubhouse, probably larger square footage, similar in height, overall height.
That's not right on the highway
That's
either.
one of the biggest buildings we have. Yeah, I mean, this will look like a 3-story office building from the highway. It won't look like a single family house, I'm sure of that.
It's probably Grace Place. Is that similar height?
Could be. Yeah, I would guess
Oh,
Grace
true.
Place is probably pretty similar.
True.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I definitely see that point. It just, to me, with this location,
There's not a whole lot of uses for this location, so it's kind of like, it's like, yeah, I don't like the massive size and gateway of the building of the town, but
I just don't know what the
it
residents.
does make a good sale for the site. Because I remember being back on planning commission when the housing development was going in, there was some debate about how to access this property, about, could you put a gas station there? And the only access was through like the neighborhood to the bottom. There was like a little roadway that they had planned in so that they could access to the neighborhood, but then that's putting all the traffic through the neighborhood. So it's kind of nice to be able to actually utilize the existing entryway onto Berthoud Parkway. And like they said, 3, 4, maybe less than 10 fire station things for sure, unless we get really busy. And the storage unit's probably gonna be probably as busy as the fire station on a Saturday or Sunday for the most part.
Yeah,
I did have one more question just kind of pop up though, now thinking back to those renderings, and
Attorney Smith, is that all right, or how does that work?
was,
It's the prerogative of the chair. I mean, you've,
Sure, we'll open it back. Trustee Hardy has one more question. So
that was the logo sign being neon and really bright. Will that be changed based on our dark sky?
I have to conform to our sign
Okay.
code, right?
Yeah, we
So
won't
that's
go
another
down
question that came to mind afterwards.
I might do like one of those dancing guys.
Well, no, just the neon's just really bright.
No,
so
no, I
just
know. It's-
something downward.
Like I said, I
facing,
mean, it's
unbacklit.
signage and things are obviously, certainly regulated within ordinance, and it's not something that ever gets in the way, so.
I'm just trying to think of other ways to maybe break up the building to make it
I
less massive box and
it doesn't really block a view to me unless you're from the street light, the stoplight there.
Yeah.
Unless the neighboring residents, I think they have higher fences, but yeah, they might see a little bit. I think, to me at least, the landscaping kind of mitigates that. I think it's a good or decent looking building, kind of like Administrator Kirk said, kind of like an office space. And yeah, any other way we could dress it up is a huge benefit, but I'm not so worried about, this is just me as a trustee, about the looks of it. So
I had some thoughts.
Yeah, Trustee Sorsili?
I definitely was concerned when I saw a large storage unit place going into a gateway area of town. But when I saw the elevation views and the way that it looks like an office building, I think that looks fabulous. And it is a low impact use. Anytime I've been to a storage unit on a busy weekend, I've run into maybe 2 other cars at a storage facility. So it's not high trafficked. So it's not gonna be a frequent use place other than the occasional people coming in and going, which is nice, because like you stated, we need a low traffic impact area there. But I think the elevation views look fabulous if we have to have something there. The height is challenging, but if it doesn't look like a storage unit, I think it's gonna be great, especially if the landscaping is there and it's making it look beautified. And the partnership with the fire station is critical because we know that the issues in that corridor are significant and they're growing, and it's only gonna continue to grow. So having emergency services there is going to increase safety, public safety and health and wellness if we have that resource in that area. So that partnership is really important. So whatever we can do, in my opinion, to make that work and make it look good for the community, provide a great service to the community to have storage as the town continues to grow, and also provide that fire service with EMS, which was great to find out that EMS will be partnering so that we can increase their services too, because they have a small building on 2nd Street. So it'd be nice to know that they're increasing their footprint in town as well. And I like the look of the fire station. If that has to be the gateway to that corridor, I think the fire station will look wonderful and inviting and safe community standards. So that's kind of
Yeah, I kind
my-
of felt the same way when they showed the picture of the big box building. I was like, oh, and I was like, oh, that's not that
nice-
bad, I guess.
not too bad, yeah.
Good question. Administrator Kirk,
Not too bad.
Administrator Kirk, with West Side, or the one with our commercial, I think it's West Side over by Quick Corner.
The one at the northeast corner of
Carpentier property.
287 Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, West Side Crossing.
Did we require a sidewalk or some kind of pedestrian on the 287 side? I thought we might have.
They own that entire stretch, so yes, there's a trail being constructed on the west side of 287, or on the west side of the property, east side of 287.
Okay.
But they own that entire stretch.
How far is this? I wish we could zoom out to see how far this is from County Road 10E. How far it wraps around. Is there a way we could do that, or is that, since it's not?
How far it wraps around?
Yeah, so from the end of this storage site,
Oh, how far down to Tenny?
if you were to walk along 287, how far would you need to go to get to 10E?
Pretty decent ways.
Okay.
It's a good distance.
Yeah, it's a long way.
I think
You'd have
sooner or
to
later
walk
we're going-
around the entire Hammond Farm subdivision.
Yeah,
Right,
right.
if you think about it that way.
I was honestly thinking for something for them. I think they might one day enjoy walking around.
Yeah.
Okay. Trustee Murphy?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the harmonious uses here on this site. I think it really makes sense. Splitting the lot and using it the way it's being used. What I really struggle with is the facade, and it is a good looking storage building, I'll admit that. But you've got a 40-foot high wall, running for 250 feet along Brickett Parkway, along one of our most prominent, parts of town. I would be interested in exploring, whenever I see a big wall like this, without any windows or ornamentation. To me, it seems like the ideal place for maybe a mural or public art. I think that might be a worthwhile amendment to explore that idea rather than just, throwing up trees and berming, as we've kind of done everywhere else.
Are you saying in exchange for that or on top of that? Or don't know yet.
Possibly a blend, I think it's worthwhile to explore that idea.
Or at least have the opportunity to have that as an open opportunity for like Baja or for one of our local art organizations to do another big mural like we did on the grain elevator. Because I know they talked about, when I was on Baja years ago, about doing something with the water tank out there, because back then that was such a standalone big structure out there. And now it's like you don't even notice it as much anymore with all the condos and stuff being built up around it. So
Cool.
That's my thought.
Okay. Trustee Ayers?
I would just echo the concerns of everyone else, 40-foot building at a big cross-section, going towards the mountains especially. I was rather concerned as to what this is gonna look like. I think some of my concerns have gone away because of the fact that it's kind of leveled off and cut into the hill, so it's not as tall from ground level as the 40 feet, it seems less. I just, I hope that the judicious landscaping would do much to cover. There was the one picture where there were the mature trees, and I understand that's a long time away, but it seemed like with good tree selection, those trees themselves are maybe 20, 30 feet tall, which is gonna break up that wall. I also agree with Trustee Murphy that maybe we could do some sort of artwork or something once again to break up that solid wall. But I think I would argue that that wouldn't be, for me, a reason to replace any of the landscaping as well. I would think that would be, for me, that's an and, not an and or.
Okay.
But I also agree that, the owner working with the fire district, that's wonderful. So I don't have any bad things to say about that, obviously. Yeah, I would really wanna focus, if this were to go through, I'd really wanna focus on covering as much as possible in unique ways that facade.
Our architectural standards will require some facade articulation and other enhancements. It won't, you can't just build a 40-foot tall blank wall. And, yeah.
Trustee Butler.
I think that, I think this project as a whole makes a lot of sense. I think to just repeat some of the comments, it's a unique site and, poses some challenges. I think the low traffic, works quite well. I think the partnership with the fire is amazing. I agree, the only concern is, I guess, the height of the walls. Otherwise, I'm in favor. I do want to clarify some of these conditions, I guess, question of staff. As our planning, we got these extra notes here given to us. Would this be conditions added to the use permit or the amendment?
And
Thank you, trustee Butler. They would be most appropriate to go with a special use permit.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying.
So we have a carryover from planning commission and then 3 new conditions, which I'm in favor of all 4 essentially. And then I also agree that if we are gonna add some mural art type requirement, that's in addition to any current landscaping requirements.
Got a question for town staff. Is there anything that prevents the storage unit from ever doing any outside storage on any of the open space left?
I think the answer to that is yes. Indoor and outdoor storage are treated a little differently under the code. Maybe I'll just let Ann answer that.
So the application before you tonight is for an indoor storage facility. If there would be any changes to include outdoor storage, the application request would need to come back before planning commission and yourselves.
Okay, so they could just like bulldoze up the ground over here to the west and start storing RVs or whatever over there?
No.
Okay.
I guess I haven't spoke. I agree with all the trustees. I think artwork would be very helpful. I think the landscaping will go a long ways. I appreciate you guys showing the berm, and I think that will cover Vermont. And in an odd way, this is kind of a harmonious relationship of a fire station next to a storage unit on this corner. Kind of a best fit for the amount of traffic. So I'm in support. If there's not anything else, trustees, we got 2 different motions in front of us. And the second one will have the conditions on it, if I heard correctly. Would anyone like to move on this first one here? Ordinance 1319.
I will move to approve ordinance 1319, an ordinance of the town of Berthoud, amending the Battered Farm planned unit development for parcel 7 to add a provision in permitted uses to allow government facilities the opportunity to apply for administrative land use process for consideration by the town of Berthoud, Larimer, and Weld counties.
Okay. Trustee Albrecht has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Trustee Murphy has seconded. Is there any final discussion on this one or amendments? Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
trustee Butler,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. All right, our second one will have the conditions that are listed on this page, plus sounds like we're okay with exploring artwork
I wouldn't mind
Or
making the
facade
motion.
treatments.
and other treatments. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Let me make it more broad.
I'll see if I can float this. I'll move to approve resolution 2023-13, approving a special use permit for this Berthoud self-storage in the town of Berthoud, Larimer, and Weld counties, Colorado, with the following stipulations. One, that the applicant shall continue to work with town staff to finalize the landscaping plan to ensure adequate screening along SBP and State Highway 287. Two, applicant shall include the reception number of the recorded access agreement on the SUP plat. This is the access from South Berthoud Parkway into the project site, providing access to both lots created through the minor subdivision. Three, the applicant shall work with town staff regarding landscaping enhancements at the southwest corner of State Highway 287 and South Berthoud Parkway, as this is an entrance to Berthoud. Four, the applicant shall provide an irrigation plan for town staff approval, inclusive of the areas proposed for seeding. And this would be the additional point I would be proposing. Five, the applicant shall explore the possible installation of a mural or graphic art on the north facade of the structure, separate and apart from branding or signage that honors the natural or agricultural heritage of Berthoud. This would supplement landscaping. This art shall occupy a minimum of 1/8 of the square footage of the total northern facade of the structure. This art shall be reviewed by and accepted by town staff prior to an art installation.
Okay, how does everyone feel about that second one? It sounded like there were some trustees wanting to add this on top of landscaping. And trustee Murphy, did you say you're saying supplement, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how it works.
In addition to the landscape.
This would supplement landscaping.
And you want to have town staff make that decision or town board approve that decision?
I'm okay with town staff.
Okay.
But I'm
Just wanted to
open
clarify.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd like to look at it.
Can I ask a question on the art?
We're getting a little close here. I think we're just gonna go ahead and make this.
Can we make it not so specific to art, but just facade enhancements? That would include art?
You just said explore artwork, so
Yeah.
there's no
Explore, okay, all right.
guarantee they have to.
That's not like
just explore.
mandatory, it's just saying
No,
explore.
it's
Right.
part of the process.
Would you be okay with having town board review that if it is explorable instead of trustee Murphy, okay with amending that?
Yeah, I would amend as stated.
Cool. All right. Any problems, issues, other exemptions or additions? Okay, thank you.
For our clarity as staff, is the expectation that I'm not sure if I know when we should bring this back to you or not.
I guess once you know if it's feasible and I know you don't want to invest too much into what a mural would look like, maybe some options or. How did we do it with the roundabouts? It was two guys proposing and they came up.
Yeah, I mean, the artwork RFPs for the roundabouts was a significant undertaking. It was probably a different kind of process that we would talk about here. I think the idea of exploring artwork and other facade enhancements is a good idea with town staff. If artwork or mural is identified as the appropriate facade enhancement, I suppose we could bring that back to you to look at.
But you're worried about us then getting picky about art and saying no and.
Well, admittedly, yes. I mean, it's
I would.
yeah, I mean, artwork is in the eye, the beauty of artwork is in the eye of the beholder. And so artwork in a public process, as you guys found with the sculptures, is kind of an interesting and
Well,
challenging.
that's where I suggest the town staff would work with like Wildfire or Baja in that aspect.
Yeah, and I
With the
think
green elevator.
Well, the complication would be would have to assist the business in acquiring new business too. So they would have to be a big part of that process and saying this will not hinder and it will properly represent our business, right? So that
and
there's
in a
that
lot of cases, like
complication too.
public murals are done under agreement or what's the right term I'm looking for? We're a public or we're a nonprofit like Baja or Wildfire gets permission under agreement with the property owner to paint a mural. They're responsible for maintenance and installation. There's kind of there's a process involved there. And technically, we could do that all over town under agreement with the property owner. And so the question is, if we had that process in place, the question is should this be a condition of approval Or should we just explore that in the context of other facade enhancements as an option? I mean, I think the idea is cool, and if there's a large blank space on a wall and we're able to enter into some kind of mural agreement, then that's an easy thing to accomplish if the facade's already set up that way, but we may not want to give that up. We may not want to give up other facade enhancements like facade articulation
Yeah.
or additional.
Well, yeah.
These are good points. So what if?
I have a
Because if
question.
facade enhancements look better than an art project.
It could in the long run, and again, I think some of that's in the eye of the beholder, right? And
No challenging DIA artwork, go ahead.
So the property between this property and State Highway 287, is that owned by the town, that strip of land?
no, it's CDOT right of way, so out north of the boundary line of this property is all highway right of way, owned and controlled by CDOT,
So we couldn't construct anything artistic there to kind of break up?
not without their permission.
What if
do you
we
think-
just left it up? I trust you, Murphy, kind of like your original idea. It's hard to think on the spot up here in a meeting,
Sure.
but Administrator Kirk, it could kind of be your call about bringing it back to the board.
It always makes me nervous. But I think that's fine if you guys are comfortable with that. I will say to the north facade, if you think about the direction that traffic is flowing, the north facade may be visible to traffic coming southbound Bertha Parkway, but it won't really be visible to traffic heading north and southbound on 287 because they'll be going past it, not looking at it. And so I think some of that is exploring like where's the right place to put it, how big makes sense, what would it look like, what's the legal arrangement for who's going to maintain it, and
That's why I
under what
wanted
license. So
facade enhancements, because I didn't want it to, the facade enhancement could be art or it could be something more structural, like you were saying.
yeah, and I think some of that will just be driven by our code requirements for architecture, and
I just want to keep the option
Or
open so
landscaping,
that if the opportunity arises, I want to say, hey, well, you agreed to this, that, we could maybe explore a mural on there.
And I think the public art idea is a really great one in the context of like overall development. It's a little hard in a one-off scenario because we don't really have that structure in place yet. And it might be something we really want to explore, is how do we incorporate public art into future commercial projects? And maybe as we explore this with the developer, maybe there's a great opportunity, maybe there's not, but it is tough to do in a one-off scenario without some kind of clear.
Hey, yeah, maybe it's just worth exploring and just keeping us
Arrangements.
appraised if it
Yeah.
goes south, and just let us know.
Just want to keep that door open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that work?
And I think that was the motion that Trustee Murphy made, was that
Right.
we would explore that,
Yep.
right? It's not a condition, it's not a you shall. But if you do, under that condition, it would be an eighth of the facade or square footage of the
Yeah.
facade.
And you also said supplement, which would be landscape, so I think your motion is good. Is there a second on that?
So we can work with the developer to explore that idea.
I'll second.
Okay, Trustee Murphy has moved on the motion. Trustee Albrecht has seconded. Clerk, will you roll call vote, please?
Trustee Butler,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Appreciate it.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. I'll call the meeting back to order, and we'll move into our final regular agenda item of the night, and that is the landscape design guidelines. And this will be opened up by Planner Ann Johnson.
I might just jump in if that's okay.
Okay, Administrator Kirk.
And then I'll just be brief, and then we'll turn it over to Aaron Bagnall from Silver Sparn Architects, who has been working on this project with us for a while. As you know, we've presented the landscape guidelines to you at previous meetings and have taken your feedback and made some adjustments to the guidelines that were included in your packet. The goal of the guidelines is to work in tandem with the comprehensive plan and our development code to provide clarity to the public, to the board, to developers about the intent of what landscapes should look like and function like in the town of Berthoud. And tonight, what we're asking for you is, excuse me, that you would approve the draft Berthoud landscape guidelines, and we would bring likely a separate action back to you at a future meeting to appropriately incorporate them into the code. Likely via an ordinance that says, project applicants shall conform to the, or should demonstrate conformance with landscape guidelines as may be amended by resolution in the future, something of that nature. But we wanted to present this to you tonight. We believe this is in final draft form. We'd love your feedback and comments. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Aaron Bagnall if that's okay.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Erin Bagnall from Sophie's Barn Architects, 2505 Walnut Street in Boulder. As Chris mentioned, we've been working with the town of Berthoud and staff on the landscape guidelines, previously worked on the architecture guidelines as well. So I'm just gonna briefly do an overview. I know that most of you, in fact, all of you have seen this already. So I'm gonna quickly go through just a review of how we've organized the documents and end with what we've revised since we talked to you guys last. So as we mentioned last time that I presented this in front of the board, this document is intended to lead with sustainability. We have a lot of water-wise focus on plant choice, stormwater management, and water conservation choices throughout the document. It's also, in addition, a document that is organized around the maintenance and of landscape. As you guys well know, that's an important part to the continual upkeep and beautification of the town. It's also meant to establish responsibilities of who is supposed to do the upkeep and maintenance of these landscapes. So there's reinforcement for owner and HOA Metro District responsibilities throughout this document. Just briefly, we've chosen the critical place types that are in need of this oversight, and those place types are the natural areas, suburban areas, general urban areas, and urban center. The document is organized with a individual bookmarking for each character district, and the beginning is mostly text content heavy, meant to introduce the components, how it's going to be, how one is to use these guidelines, and the application of these guidelines and the objectives. Further on in the document, you'll see the general sections that provide overall guidance on the landscape, the plant selection and maintenance. And each character district is itemized with the visual presentation and tabs and specifics to those character districts in regards to the landscape design. And finally, the master plant list is at the end, and one thing we've added is, and I'll go into what we've added before. So this is kind of what I want to focus on, is what we changed since we last spoke to you, since that's the important things to note. One thing that we heard from the board was how to insert language that would allow somebody reading it to understand who this applies to. So you'll see throughout the document, if you had a chance to read it, that we're specifically applying to new development and large applications only. So that's really what the stuff that's under the town board, the planning staff purview. Things that come through the planning staff's review will be, this landscape document will be applied to. Another thing that we changed is including a lot of plant selection language to prioritize seasonal colors and different types of varieties so that we have winter color and winter interest as well. We've also kind of speckled about fun facts in throughout the document about how Berthoud is the garden spot, pollinator supporter, tree city. We've introduced fire-wise landscaping tips and also water-saving landscaping tips. The plant list was a topic of discussion last time, and with the understanding that plant lists are a moving target and pretty much always they change a lot. We have kept our plant list, but we also added a hot link and a website link to the Plant Select website, so that is continually updated and also can be used as a resource for a Plant Select guide. We also, in the plant list, we added informational plant facts and imagery throughout. And finally, at the end, we included the prohibited tree list. So small things, tweaks, like Chris said, I think this is a document that's pretty much in final form, and we're welcoming any comments or thoughts that you've had as you've had a chance to review it.
Are we gonna go through the additions? You said you were gonna wait till the end.
That was it. That was my updates to do at the end.
Okay.
My last slide, sorry. Oh, we can stay on that
No,
if
we're
we
good.
want.
Okay, thanks very much.
Maybe we can go back to that slide if you don't mind.
Yeah, they can still see it.
It's on our
Yep,
screen.
Oh, it's on your
sorry,
screen.
I have
Okay,
my other
sorry.
one in front of me.
Yeah, we can go with that as a bullet list if you want. Maybe I sped through.
That would
them.
be great, actually.
Apologies. So I'll start with the first one. A lot of the conversation last time was about specifying who this applies to. And so the language in the document has been changed and clarified to include new development only. Do you have any questions about that?
No, it says in the Old Town one that it doesn't apply to redevelopment on single family residential, right?
Correct.
But other ones downtown probably would apply to.
In areas where there's, if you were gonna do a significant redevelopment of a commercial structure and not just like a facade treatment, but like, you're completely changing the site layout, we would expect you to follow these guidelines. In a commercial setting, but yeah, if you're a single family residence in downtown or an existing suburban neighborhood, no, these would not apply to you. If you were, and I actually think there's some specific language, I'll find it. Right at the beginning. Yeah, so the suburban and old town residential landscape design lines apply to all new projects, not existing, and I think the note is at the top, Aaron, is that right, where there's I gotta find it. I just read it this afternoon, because I knew this question would come up again. Now I can't find it.
I could bring mine over.
Here we go. This is on page 3 of the document at the top, how the guidelines are applied. About halfway through that first paragraph, it says to achieve the stated purpose, the guidelines will apply to all new construction and substantial building alterations that require approval by the town of the community development staff. In the planning department and building department, incorporating these guidelines into a project's design will result in aesthetically pleasing. So the intent is, any, a major renovation or a new project that would require community development review in the planning and building department.
Okay, so something substantial.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is limiting turf grass is kind of a requirement, less of a guideline, right?
It's
Or-
not a requirement.
Okay.
The question about turf grass, there's a number of places throughout the document where turf grass is mentioned. In like the urban residential district, which would be a higher density style of development, likely townhomes for multifamily. There's notes in there that say minimize turf area. The same is true with like suburban and old town residential. The idea is that turf grass is discouraged except in active areas adjacent to outdoor living areas and patios, places like that, but it's not prohibited and it is not restricted. It's discouraged. And
Okay.
so
So how would a developer if I'm hearing this, a builder would probably look at this like nothing up front and maybe a little turf in the back?
it could be either or. They
No
can have
patios
limited
up front
areas
now.
of turf adjacent to outdoor spaces. Like a lot of our newer residential projects have large porches and things like that. So I mean, if they wanted to place turf adjacent to some of those spaces, I think those would be perfectly appropriate. The same would be true in backyards. Some of it too is, it depends on the type of project. Some like the Mission Home cottages, for instance, where they have backyards, they're pretty small. And having, 500 square feet of turf that is their entire backyard, I don't know that we'd have issue with. In areas where you have a 10 or 11,000 square foot lot on the end of a cul-de-sac, You know, the idea would be to have nice turf landscaping adjacent to their patios and outdoor living areas and have some play space, but that the entire, you know, quarter acre wouldn't be all sod. And so there's some flexibility here, built into the guidelines intentionally. That's why they're guidelines, not regulations, to give us the ability to make some reasonable, you know, decisions about, are you meeting the intent? You know, if it's a 10,000 square foot lot and the landscape plan is all bluegrass, I don't know that meets the intent of the guidelines. But if it has a nice bluegrass yard and some attractive, you know, trees and shrubs and other things surrounding that to take up some of that unnecessary space.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then I'll point you to the first on page 2 on how to use the guidelines. It's each applicant for development must demonstrate to what extent it incorporates these guidelines, and if they don't meet specific ones, they can provide rationale for the design. So like Chris said, it gives you a flexibility, and town staff and planning commission, the flexibility to kind of weigh what they're doing in respond to that.
Okay, so trustees, I realize I just started asking questions. Mind if I finish up? Please. Cool. This doesn't have any effect on tree lawn spacing, requirements on tree lawns? Nope. Okay.
It actually doesn't change any of our current landscape code requirements. So this is in addition to.
Yeah, this is just some color and some guideline, I guess, to make things look better.
Talking color here, tree lawns typically have sod, and I know that's a no-no here. Are we allowing gravel then?
We would require, so in
On a tree
landscape
lawn?
guidelines, the expectation is, especially like in a commercial project and in you know, large subdivisions, that licensed landscape architects are preparing these landscape plans, and so we would expect to see something, frankly, all rock in a tree lawn with no plantings wouldn't be acceptable under our guidelines.
Do we have a
Or in our
percentage
code.
standard of how much would have to be like living material or something?
Yeah, like a ground cover of some sort other than gravel. I just saw it in here under, I thought it was suburban that said cobbles and rocks or something, local quarries are encouraged. Shoot, I gotta find this word.
Let's see if I can find this here.
And then finally, did this reduce anything from the tree list? I'm guessing not, from our town approved tree list. We're keeping the same trees.
Oh, yeah,
We worked with Paul, I almost said Josh, with Paul, our town forester, to make sure we had the right tree list included.
Same one.
Yeah.
Okay. And they'll be irrigated. We're gonna require irrigation for those still?
Trees should be irrigated, yes. We require irrigation in all of our landscaped areas, especially, you know, for common area landscaping. Even native turf grass areas, we require now installation of irrigation, because otherwise it doesn't establish well enough.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
they need irrigation to establish even native areas now. And then, you know, that way, if there's an issue and there's areas that die off, they can reseed and re-irrigate and reestablish. So, you know, unirrigated areas are no longer considered landscaping in the town.
Okay. A question we had last time is the answer was it's hard to find these plants for the average consumer. Like you can't get them at Home Depot, or maybe you can get them at a garden center. But did anything change since then? I know we can go to Plant Select, but can you buy those off of Plant Select?
Plant Select, I believe keeps Plant Select was given to me by a landscape architect as a suggestion to include, because they keep their localized list updated to what's available in the Colorado market.
In the Colorado market?
Yes.
Okay, so if a plant died, I'd be able to find it without having to hire a landscaper with a wholesale account. I could find this on my own.
If you knew what the plant was and you were trying to replace it, then yes, ideally you'd be able to find it. And if you can't, then it would probably give you another selection that is comparable.
Okay, I think that's all I have for now. Other questions, trustees? Trustee Ayers?
Administrator Kirk, I can't remember how far we are in the process, but would these guidelines apply to any sort of upgrades to the Massachusetts or Second Street projects as they move forward?
Like Third and Massachusetts, yeah, we would abide by our own.
Did I say Second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. yeah, along the Third and Massachusetts project, we would abide by our own guidelines, yeah. Now, I think some of that is already kind of being dealt with in the context of how we might relay out Railroad Park, for instance, the idea of creating more plaza space and more active outdoor areas would naturally limit some of the enhanced plantings, but in terms of like permeable paving, those kinds of things that we would want to incorporate, yes.
And I think the other question I had, speaking of permeable material, et cetera, and I don't really know how to ask this question, so I apologize, but in this kind of research and in this kind of application, is there anything that could be done, or is there any, I guess, issue that can be overcome with large flat rooftop areas? Or does that just get drained into this kind of system? Is there anything that could be done on those rooftops to stop them from being, I guess, 5,000 square feet of tar?
Living rooftops.
Yeah, living roofs. We didn't get into living roofs in this document, and I think that
We did though, there are notes in here about roof drains, commercial buildings draining into rain gardens or permeable surfaces, so they're not just, in commercial spaces, you can't just discharge to the parking lot into the street, right? That the idea under the guidelines is they discharge into landscape areas, let that water move through natural material to soak back in, but then also eventually discharge where it has to after it's gone through, appropriate landscaping.
That's all I have for now.
I've got a few questions, and I guess we try to refresh my memory regarding xeriscape or type guidelines. Do we have those in current code, or is this? 'Cause I don't really see anything in this document really pertaining to or speaking about xeriscape. So if we have new construction, development, or even existing, old town lots, if they wanted to tear up all their turf and lay rock, do we have any guidelines currently in our town, or will this address that?
There's nothing prohibiting you from tearing out your front yard and replacing it with all rock, unless you have an HOA or Metro District that has other covenants prohibiting you from doing that. Like in Old Town, where there's no HOA or Metro District, there's no covenants. Our current codes don't prohibit you from doing that. We wouldn't encourage it, but
and it's not supported in this document.
it's not supported in this document either, yeah. And so the idea of I
Not
think-
supported as in not supported as in you don't support a xeriscape front yard
Yeah,
If
actually,
it's only rock.
yeah,
Really need plantings.
There's zero skip with a Z,
with an X, that's what I'm talking about, yeah.
and there's zero skip with an X.
yeah, so
I
the
think I
term,
get Jeff's
the
point.
term xeriscape doesn't show up in this document anywhere. Instead, what we're focused on is water-wise landscaping. Water-wise landscaping is still intended to be lush, it's still intended to be attractive, seasonal. Rock and cactus would not qualify in our landscape guidelines. So,
Well, that's, okay.
So it's not addressed in this document, but we don't have anything codified.
there's nothing prohibiting you from doing that in your front yard if you don't have some other.
To my
covenant control.
knowledge, most HOAs don't really have that documentation either.
Well, that's a good question. I honestly have no idea. But it is not uncommon in the handful of covenant situations that I'm aware of for the Metro District, the HOA to require approval of your landscape before you get to modify it. And so,
There's the one at Farmstead that almost went to kind of like a lawsuit,
mhm.
but the lady that tore out a turf won because of some state law saying the HOA cannot prevent that.
I think what they can't do is say you cannot do it. I think they can have some control over how it gets done. But what I don't think they can do is prohibit it. At least that's the way I understand it. But I'm
That's kinda
not
where you
legal
go.
opinion, but I think that's typically the way.
That's the way I understand it as well.
If the plants die and people can't find them that easily, it might just turn into a rock garden.
But
So do we-
the installation of plant material, like we don't, even today in any landscape, even the ones that are, like a commercial landscape, for instance, if plants die, they can replace it with other plant material. They don't have to replace it with what was put there originally. And in some cases, it's not a good idea to put back what was put there originally because it died for a reason. Sometimes that is. That's especially true with trees, it seems like. Oftentimes, when you remove a tree that died and you plant the same species, it just dies again. There's something about the soil condition or the environmental condition where it's at that particular species doesn't do well enough. And maybe you need a different variety or different hardier tree or something that tolerates a different, level of acidity in the soil or whatever, right? So I mean, but we don't force you to replace it with the exact same plant that was there before. Our code doesn't require that.
We require a tree permit, so something that is reviewed. But there's not necessarily a review, I'm just talking out loud here, there's not really a review for tearing out your sod, putting in 100% rock, but no plant.
No, we don't require you to get a permit from the town to re-landscape your current yard.
So how do we address that? How's the, what's that?
You would have to adopt a new ordinance that says prior to re-landscaping your yard, you have to get a permit from the town. I'm not sure that's a bridge we wanna try to cross, but that would be a policy decision by the town board, I think. And that, I think.
Well, without having to require a permit, can we still have landscape
Guidelines.
Well, so
ordinances that don't allow just pure rock, 100% rock?
on existing yards, I don't know. I mean, we certainly can within the context of new development, right? But part of the problem with new development is similar to paint color, if I'm being honest, right? Like, on a new single family house, we don't have any code that prohibits you from painting it pink the day after you buy it, or bright green or whatever. We don't have those codes in place to prohibit you from aesthetic changes to your lot or to your home that aren't building code related. So, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. We'd have to consider that. I'd have to probably rely on Aaron for some guidance on that as well.
Yeah, I mean,
This Aaron, not that Aaron, yeah.
yeah, I mean, the question becomes, as a statutory town, you've got the authority under the state law to do what you can do. I'd have to look at and see what sort of specific authority there'd be for that kind of a police power, exercise of your police power.
I mean, we could just call it a junk or abandoned vehicle, put under that ordinance, right?
Yeah, a little bit different.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing, though. We're already having that control in a degree over junk.
In most cases, that's a public health and safety kind of issue.
Yeah. And there's already a
It's
state statute that actually
Oh,
gives you
yeah, I could
that
make
specific
okay.
authority
I
when
could
it
make a
comes to
public
junk.
health argument on
Yeah.
rock and how it affects trees and urban
I
denial.
think that's the kind of thing we
Yeah.
would have to do actually,
Yeah.
and we've had this conversation about a similar issue in the past.
Mhm.
And that is requiring replacement of street trees that die. Where we feel like the board would likely have to make some kind of public health and safety finding in order to mandate
Yeah.
those. And so that might be, we'd be breaking new ground though, I think.
I think that's probably,
We need
Sure.
oxygen, that's a
And
health
I
issue.
appreciate the
Plant trees
intent
and put out
that we don't want like all the rocks xeriscaping, that type of xeriscaping, but I think when it comes to enforcement, the goal is always to educate and have a plan like this that's really well informed to give to our community so that they can make these decisions and put plants in their yards that are low water, low maintenance. And I mean, like as being a single mom the last 3 years, this is like gold. Because like how can I take care of my 2,000 square feet of grass and trees and all of this when I don't have the finances or time? This is like gold. So, but there are people who can't, there are elderly who can't do any yard work and they put rock out and it's not the most beautiful thing, but everyone's not doing it. So as long as we're, I think, setting a precedent of this is what we want our community to look like, lush and green, but water savvy, I think that's a better, more friendly approach than enforcement. That's just my.
Yeah.
my feeling.
I think to just Parker's point, it might be a little bit easier for this to go south if it's hard to find a replacement for a plant. Versus us in downtown with big shade trees that, I mean, my yard's green for months without having to irrigate just because I'm lucky, got really old trees. But in these new areas, I'm worried about it dying off, can't find a replacement, let's just add rock. Is there a way that we could, I found that thing again about quarried gravel.
Oh, it's page 12, right?
15,
Oh, 15.
maybe it is 12, I'm sorry.
Well, it's page 12 of the document.
So can we
To
just,
elaborate
go ahead.
just somewhat here, I am sincerely concerned that we're gonna see, I mean, we don't have a lot of rock yards currently, but I think it's a trend that we will likely see become more commonplace. And as that happens, I think it would be prudent of the town to kind of give our residents some direction on that. My experience with HOA, just in my profession, that I look at these documents more than I want to. Most HOAs don't have a lot of landscape guidelines. They do have a requirement to get some, approval, but that's it. So that's, I realize it's a little bit outside the purview of this document, but it has me thinking about that. So I would like to discuss that, and I'm not wanting to require anything excessive, but I do think we require, trees in certain places. So I think it would be appropriate to require some plants in some places as well. In addition to this document, it does state that artificial turf would be, I think, reserved to only backyards. Is that something that has been discussed to open it to other spaces like front yards?
We talked about it internally after, that was part of the discussion that we had last time we presented this with the board. And we came to the understanding that it was best to keep it to backyards and I believe it's sports fields. So
Yeah, athletic turfs and backyards. If the board wants to allow artificial turf in front yards, technically this doesn't prohibit it anyway, right? Again, these are guidelines, they're not hard and fast rules. But the intent is that artificial turf would generally be for backyard spaces. I've seen really nice artificial turf and I've seen really bad artificial turf. And so that's always the worry with it going to the front yard. This is a bad example from a different jurisdiction, different state, but somebody tore out their whole front yard one time and put down used artificial turf that they just rolled out without any
Wish.com turf?
yeah, and it had like stripes on it still, and from like an old athletic field. And the neighbors went ballistic, and there was nothing we could do about it because our codes didn't prohibit that. So I don't know. Professionally installed high quality turf can look great even in a front yard.
If it's permeable, right? 'Cause we still-
All artificial turf's permeable.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it actually takes water pretty fast.
And you still require irrigation?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about artificial turf. In a lot of cases, certainly on sports fields, it requires irrigation system not to water the turf, but to use it to clean it and all that kind of stuff. So, and actually to cool it, because it can get hot in the summertime even with.
Yeah, because I've heard they're hot and I'm worried about the trees underneath, but I see Trustee Butler's point.
Because I thought there was something done with the tree lawns years ago, because I remember standing out there as a citizen debating with the town board at the time about the guidelines for the tree lawn area, because everybody's pulling out the tree lawn, putting it in rock, and then the trees were dying because the trees were heating up too much because of all the rock in the area. And I remember debating against a few people about, lawnmowers are polluting and grass clippings take up our landfills and all this other stuff. And I was like, well, then you're doing it wrong. But I thought we had some sort of policy and eventually put in place about what percentage of the tree lawn could be gravel versus a living thing like plants or grass. And it was just tree lawn specific, it wasn't front yard specific, because the town basically still controls the tree lawn area. And that's why they were able to create some policy based on the tree lawn and not the rest of the front yard.
I don't think that we have
Maybe it's been so long that it's been rewritten multiple times.
No, Kurt had something on encouraging guard
This is
spots.
long before Kurt.
Oh, okay.
This was back when I first bought my house, like 20-some years ago.
So do you think?
Your dad was mayor at the time.
I'd have to go back through.
Oh, I've heard about that debate.
I don't think that we have.
There was one way back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people,
Yeah, I don't think we have a code requirement though that speaks to plant material in the tree lawn, other than trees themselves.
Because that was back when a lot of people were ripping out the front tree lawns and just putting it in gravel.
Yeah.
And even wood chips because they didn't want to mow it. They said it was too narrow and too hard. And it's like, well, since it's town property, I don't want to maintain it. I'm just gonna put this out there.
Yep. Turn off the irrigation.
Yeah, that was kind of the attitude back then.
But to go back to this, for these, there is a diversity requirement or a guideline for a tree lawn, or did I just totally hear that wrong?
So what
I don't think
what
we addressed
the code, or not the code, sorry, what the guidelines say, and Erin can correct me if she disagrees, but I'm trying to find it. In general, there's notes in here about the intent is the landscapes are designed with a diverse plant palette, like 5 different kinds of plants and species. That monoculture is not, wouldn't meet the intent of the guidelines. So the idea is that, here we go. Monoculture and or plant palettes including 5 or less species are discouraged in the suburban and old town residential guidelines. And so, again, new land development applications for the common areas and the public spaces within a subdivision will require licensed landscaped architects, which they all do anyway.
But we don't have any
Individual
guideline
sig-
requirement of, I'm talking about the ground cover, about you can't do all gravel.
No, it just says landscaping should include a variety of plant, tree, and ground cover species.
Have you guys thought about the problems with gravel versus an organic kind of ground cover for keeping moisture in and?
On page 13 of the labeled 13,
Okay, labeled.
urban downtown, it specifically addresses street trees. And one of the lower bullet points, it says use native grasses, paved areas, and ground covers within the design of a tree lawn.
Oof. So paved areas would be,
So paved areas is more in the downtown grid. Ground covers and native grasses are the other applications of it.
There's some really beautiful tree lawn examples, not here that I can point to, but with hedges, with bunch grasses. But that we've installed, I've been a part of installing in other places that look great.
yeah, and I admittedly, having such a tough time with this, have seen good jobs and you don't see them often.
You don't.
So the idea
That's
is
true.
to, this can go south real quick if a builder just wants to get out of here quick, and doesn't really care.
And I think the part of the there is no in our code now, I'll have to find it really quick if I can. In the new zoning districts, there are more intensive landscape requirements for builders to provide more like a model landscape plan for each house. So in addition to model floor plans, so like in a large subdivision, let's use Vantage as an example where D.R. Horton is building the majority of the homes. They will put together 5 to 6 model floor plans. Each one of those will have 3 different elevations. So you get kind of, it's really technically only 5 or 6 different houses, but you get, visually it looks like, 15 to 20 different houses. Our new code requirements in our new zone districts actually require subdivision developers to provide, once you hit a certain threshold in a lot that you'll be developing in an area, to provide model landscape plans that would serve as a guideline more than, each lot is unique, right? But that would serve as a guideline for the builders. So that would give us the opportunity in those new zone districts to review and approve the plans and, even for the front yards, which the guidelines don't technically require for single family, building permits. But in new zone districts, the code already has some expectation that there would be model front yards. Cause typically the builder installs the front yard, right? And if you drive through any new subdivision, Heritage Ridge, Vantage, they all look the same. It's a patch of grass, some 3/4 to 1 inch river rock, and 3 shrubs and a tree. And then the tree is lucky if you get a tree outside of the tree line. So the intent is that we would get away from those what I would call the standard front yard suburban.
And I think it's great to add some of this stuff. You know, I go through Prairie Star, it already is, a lot of the areas, Farmstead 2, quarter of the front's rock.
Yep.
It just seems to me we're doing enough already, so to keep pushing on that worries me. And it also worries me if we're kind of getting away from turf, at least on the tree lawns, because not necessarily the turf, but the water helps the roots underneath. So if we're trying to discourage water use, that's just, I mean, a tree can make it, but it's gonna be more sick and stunted and.
Actually, I would argue that in a lot of cases, they'd be healthier because they would still be required to be irrigated. Like you wouldn't be able to plant a tree lawn, you wouldn't be able to plunk down, 2 trees and a whole bunch of rock and zero irrigation. So the expectation would be that you would have a drip irrigation system. If you're putting in rock and some bunch grasses and a couple of shrubs and trees, that there would be dedicated drip irrigation. In most cases, that's actually better for the tree than overhead irrigation in the grass.
I'd have to disagree. I think having the overhead is better as it grows, and the turf helps keep it down versus rock that it just evaporates or more quickly. But having a tree ring,
The
it does.
drip irrigation is underneath the rock.
Yeah.
It has an opportunity to soak in.
Okay.
And typically overhead irrigation doesn't get down more than about 6 inches unless you're just super overwatering.
Yeah, which will need to be done initially. But I've seen it with the town that we're not expanding our rings as the canopy, as the crown grows.
That's true.
Which is off of Amy Lentz from our tree board says that's a no-no, right? Like you have to have irrigation all day long. It has to be the size of the crown.
Well, I think what Paul would tell you, I shouldn't speak for Paul. After a couple of years, those trees should be established and shouldn't need supplemental water. If they're appropriate tree varieties, and they've been well established and they've developed a decent root system, in most cases, they shouldn't need a lot of supplemental water. So, like when a tree's got a 15-foot canopy, you don't need a 15-foot irrigation ring at the edge of the canopy.
No, I would just put a sprinkler in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I
really
strongly
shouldn't need
disagree with
water
that
at all,
point of view.
actually, in those cases.
Got an arborist neighbor that's, and Amy said the same thing, but it's a misnomer that the 1 to 3, and it's a misnomer that it's only in the summer too.
No, they definitely need winter watering, and we talk about, we post information with folks about that, but it's not,
So this only allows drip, doesn't allow overhead up front. I'm obviously more concerned with the trees than anything. Okay, so
no,
you can.
that's not prohibited in the guidelines, not addressed that way.
And if the trees were happen to die because of lower water usage than what we have right now with overhead, they're not required to replace them, right?
They're not required to replace them now, even with overhead.
I know, but I'm worried about this getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could, but I don't think what we're not suggesting, I think it's important to say, what we're not suggesting is that everybody replace their front yards with rock and no irrigation. So, I think intelligently designed landscapes might include mulch, or a solid mulch space around the trees and rock in strategic areas between trees in the tree lawn. There's a lot of creative ways to design landscape that's super healthy that doesn't have any turf.
Yeah.
And our expectation would be that's what it would be.
To me, it's just water and
not
keeping the
rock
water
and
underneath.
cactus.
So the rock really is bad for that. It doesn't, it's the heat according to the neighbor, but it's the heat is making it go out. And generally you want to have something on the surface to kind of retain as much of that moisture, keep it underneath as long as you can.
Rock mulch retains moisture pretty well, actually.
What's rock mulch? Is it?
It's just rock.
Oh,
Like, if you place river rock over, and actually I bet if you go to any of the new subdivisions, you peel back some of that rock and there's probably some weed fabric or weed barrier between the dirt and the rock. It's wet underneath, very wet in most cases. It holds moisture well. On the water sitting on the surface of the rocks will evaporate, but any water that gets through, which is, it's a super permeable surface, will soak in, and what that rock does is provide a heat and shade barrier to, keep all that water from evaporating out of the soil. So rock can work well as a mulch to retain moisture.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that we're giving people a template, a palette to work with that is gonna provide water-wise and good plant selection ideas and good ideas for creating variety and then creating different types of tree lawns that are acceptable. So like Chris said, we're not saying that everybody has to do this. We're giving them options. And so I strongly doubt that everyone is going to go out and put gravel in or rock in their tree lawn. There might be some people that do that. And if it's appropriate and the trees are surviving and there's drip irrigation then that is useful for the life of the tree and the use of the water. So I don't think we should maybe hinder ourselves or get stuck on the rock conversation necessarily.
Yeah.
But more so.
So as long as we require some type of diversity, I just, from my experience on the board, you give a builder, there's builders that don't care and they're gonna do whatever and get it out the quickest. And a rock's available, they can leave, and it's probably the most enduring versus some kind of gorilla grass that you have to replace. So that's why I'm worried that
And a lot of folks
KB
don't
Homes is
want,
gonna be like gravel, we're out.
a lot of folks don't want mulch like a traditional like cedar mulch or, shredded wood mulch because it doesn't last, it blows away, it thins, it starts to look shabby after a couple of years, it needs to be replaced. And so rock is more durable in that sense. It's why it gets used in landscapes a lot. And it does create, from a heat standpoint, you're 100% right. Like it will help suppress weeds, actually in some cases better than mulch. If it's installed the right way, it'll retain moisture, but it'll also generate heat. And so the plant selections have to be appropriate to withstand heat in a way that maybe it wouldn't need to be if it was in a mulch bed. There's trade-offs, like rock mulch is not the best material on the planet or anything. There's trade-offs with all of them. But again, I think what we're trying to do is create a guideline and a palette, and then with an expectation that landscape architects use that creatively to design really attractive water-wise landscapes. And in most cases, landscape architects are pretty good at that. And there's some bad landscape architects, but like the front yards of homes currently are not landscape architect designed, right?
No, Nation Homes is all rock at Prairie Star.
Yeah, but again, they're not even designed by architects or landscape architects. They just hire a landscape firm that they just go, hey, here's your spot, do your thing, right? And then a crew of dudes shows up and women, I don't mean to be,
No, you'd be disparaging on men, that's fine.
a crew of
When the girls show up, things get done. When the guys show up, yeah.
That's true, but a crew of people shows up, they just kind of mark off a spot, they plunk down some metal edging and rock and grass, and they move on to the next house, right? There's no design involved. And I'm sorry, I know Trustee Ayers been trying to interject. Speak over.
Just because these are guidelines, I wonder if it wouldn't be to give more clarity. On page 11, the suburban and old town residential, point number 3. What if language were included to say landscaping should include a variety of plant? What if it would just said landscaping in the front yard and tree lawn should include a variety of plant, tree, and ground cover species? That way it gives those guidelines. It shows that we don't want tree lawns to be just rock or just turf. And then that sort of adds the front yard to keep the same design features as the front yard. It gives those guidelines without necessarily limiting the choices of people, so they don't get fed up and just say, okay, so I'm just gonna replace it all. And it also gives
I like
those
that.
guidelines as well.
That works for me.
Tree rocks.
Yeah, I think that's a better solution than not address anything. I would just even add, we just discourage, not put in discouraging
Vegetation.
gravel. I think vegetation's a good thing, but I guess I haven't done the research Administrator Kirk has that these are actually fine for trees. It's counter to what I've learned, but same with the drip. So I am concerned about the tree lawns and how this affects that.
Right, I mean, I think the argument is that these are guidelines, and if we wanted to actually discourage it, we would have to create policy to stop it from happening. But if it's just guidelines, I think focusing people on the intent, focusing people on the goal of the landscaping in these new areas, I think would hopefully get people to think in the way that this document is trying to get them to.
Yeah, I couldn't say ban, but we could say gravel should be used sparingly or something like that.
I think we could even be more broad than that, with just a note that says something like, ground cover and landscape materials, should be appropriately, placed to, retain moisture, to, reduce heat stress on the plants. I think we could provide some of that context.
If, and if, I don't know if this information is out there, but I wonder if you could include one of the little tip, blurbs, that maybe rock increases the air temperature by X% per square yard of rock or something like that, to kind of once again show sort of
We can look into that.
data to show, hey, when you put rock in your yard, yeah, you don't have to water the grass. However, it increases the temperature in your yard by X%, or it increases the temperature to the plants by X%. I don't know if that information exists, right? But to kind of keep with the character of the document, it's sort of, hey, this is what we're suggesting, and this is why, and here's some data to kind of back that up.
One note that I think does help, and we would expect to kind of see within landscape plans are things like, there's a note in here on page 12, in the picture, but also in the language, that incorporating landscape features that soften the transition from the residence to the street. If you propose to just install a bunch of rock, that would certainly not soften the transition from the residence to the street. Like we would expect, softening occurs with organic materials. It doesn't mean you couldn't creatively incorporate rock into the landscape, right? But just a whole mess of rock out in the front yard we've talked about it a lot, but it would not be supported under these guidelines.
Right, and I think to Chris's point, this is really just as a whole, something that holds development accountable for their landscape plans and allows town staff and the board's planning commission to reference these documents and say, how are you meeting these? Show us how. And if they're not putting something in front of you that's appropriate, then you can reference many things in this document and share with them how to make their landscape plans better.
So I don't think anyone does this, but is like roses and stuff like that clearly just not allowed? Any kind of plants that aren't on this list could not be used, correct? I mean, you can go back and plant them yourself, but yeah.
No, that's true. That's not true.
No.
These are just suggestions.
These are guidelines.
These are just suggestions for water-wise plants.
Yeah.
And the notes on the plant list says some of these are Colorado natives, some are pollinator species. These are suggested plants, but this is not a required planting list.
Yeah, not at all. And that's why we reference the plant select, because that gives an even broader selection of water-wise Colorado native pollinator friendly plants that anyone can choose from.
Mm-hmm. And then the artificial grass in the backyard is okay. Turf grass in the backyard is also okay, which would be big for trees too.
Yep.
And these cottonwoods are open space only.
This is actually, sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. I'm also reading Denver's tree lawn street requirements from their streetscape design manual. And maybe there is a note in here, and as I'm thinking, one of the reasons why we don't want rock in tree lawns is because rock ends up on the sidewalk and in the street. And so there's good reason to say you can't do that. Denver actually prohibits, it does not allow for gravel, tree bark, wood chips, loose stones, or other non-organic materials to be used as permanent ground cover in tree lawns. It also says you can't put bluegrass in, so your alternatives are preferred ground covers like Himalayan border jewel, moneywort, woolly thyme, periwinkle, other kinds of organic ground covers. I'm not sure if we wanna go that far and prohibit turf grass, but maybe we wanna be, I don't know why it just dawned on me, but
Well, I think if the conversation right now is around rock, and if Denver's doing that might
yeah,
be.
I'm sure it's not
if
enforced.
interested.
It says the person with bluegrass in her tree.
Yeah. Then that's for new streetscapes,
new
so that's different, but mulches are recommended as an initial plant material to establish some of those things, but it's nice not to have loose material in tree lawns because it ends up in on the sidewalk in the street. So irrespective of aesthetics or heat or water, maybe I think we can add a couple of notes in there about the goals of attractive, water-wise, intelligently designed tree lawns. And some of that could be as simple as, one of the things that really bugs me is 6-foot tree lawns, which they're really hard to irrigate efficiently, right, with pop-up sprinklers, because the water just goes everywhere. And so that's part of the struggle with, typical 6-foot wide grass tree lawns is they water the sidewalk and the street a lot more than they water the grass.
You just get a smaller head.
In most cases that,
It's different from my front yard.
yeah, in most cases, that's a tough thing to do. So maybe we say, look, in tree lawns that are 10 feet or more, bluegrass is an appropriate ground cover that can be irrigated efficiently. But in areas where they're narrower, we would expect different kinds of ground covers. That would actually be nice because that would create large tree lawns in some situations that might be required as kind of basic requirements of the code. I'm just thinking out loud, but we can add 2 or 3 notes in this section, I think, that will clarify and strengthen the intent of attractive organic material yards, not rock and cactus.
Those are all my questions. Sorry. Probably took 30 minutes. Who's next? Anyone else?
But you want to time
Hey, these are relevant. No other questions? Okay. All right, I'll open it up to the public, to the audience here. Ms. Wilson, I know you've been waiting. Thank you.
It was that obvious. 1461 Merlette Street is where I still reside. I did look over your packet and I'm very interested in the guidelines and how they affect the residents in particular. Just for clarification, these new guidelines are just for new developments.
Correct.
So what do the older developments have as a fallback for things like the statement number 10 in the overall says property owners, HOAs, metro districts to replace dead, dying, damaged, or deceased plant materials during the same growing season as removal. What fallback do we have to enforce having our plants look healthy and lawns look great?
Mayor Karspec, do you want me to answer that?
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
There's really the only avenue that we have today is HOA covenant requirements for maintenance of landscapes. The town's code does not require trees to be replaced within the private homeowner's tree lawn.
Or the street trees?
That's the tree lawn. The tree lawn is the street trees, yeah.
Okay. The HOA has direction from the state that is a right of way and they have no right to tell the homeowners what they can and cannot do in that area. That's what our HOA manager said to us recently.
I think that's a decision that the HOA will have to make with their legal counsel. The responsibility for maintaining the tree lawn within the right of way is the adjacent homeowner. So that's what our code says.
Okay. When you were talking about xeriscaping, we looked into it with the resource center and possibly getting the $1,000 payback for it. To remove our 20 by 20 foot grass lawn in front and a little strip of grass was $1,500. To do that xeriscape from two different companies was $11,000. So I don't know that people are going to be rushing out to do a really good job of xeriscaping with the X to do a lot of their lawns. I mean, it was prohibitive for us to do that. When it comes to the rock mulch, the best size rock is going to be 1/2 inch. And this was told to me when I was looking at the possibility of doing the xeriscape, because 1/2 inch will let the water go in, but it's not gonna let the evaporation go out. So just to do rock mulch and say it's great for retaining water doesn't really work in the opinions that I've received. I have a question about the caliber of trees. This is on the plant selection and design guidelines. And you're talking about street trees and the species along the same streets should be the same size and shape and meet the following size criteria at the time of planting. And you're talking major roads to be 4-inch calipers. And is that a new tree being put in?
Ms. Wilson, if you could ask all your questions, then we can have staff or applicant, or our consultant answer at the end. I'm writing them down for you though.
Okay, and this is my last question. And that is,
This only applies to new development.
in new developments. But from what I learned at CSU is you are better off to plant a 2-inch tree than you are a 4-inch tree. Because in 4 years, they're gonna be the same size, but that 4-inch tree is going to be stressed because when they put that in, they're cutting all of those smaller roots that provide the nourishment and the water for that tree. So this is just research-based information, and I'm sure you have professionals and they know what they're doing, but just keep thoughts like that in mind.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. We've hit
You're
the 20
most
minutes.
welcome, sir.
Those are great. Thank you. Hope we answered them all. 4-inch calipers. Okay. Is there anyone else? Dan? The only other one? All right. Close public comment here. Bring it back to the board. Any thoughts, deliberation?
I will say in general, the document is awesome. It provides really good guidance to me, to developers, I think, as well. It shows the intent that the town has to keep it green. And I think moving forward with WaterWise, with permeable materials to keep water in the ground instead of into the stormwater system, I think is great moving forward. And besides some of the specific comments that were made in our discussion, I like the document.
All right. Thanks for starting this off. Thank you. Trustee Butler?
I agree. I think this document's great. It does give some really good clarity and visuals. And yeah, just addition to my comments about, xeriscape, tree lawns, I think Commissioner Kirk's suggestions of what we can add to clarify those would be great.
Yeah, those are easy.
Trustee Hardy?
Nothing more.
Okay. Trustee Albrecht?
I agree with the other comments made.
All right. Trustee Murphy?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an excellent document. I really hope we spread the news of this far and wide once we're done with it. Beyond that, some of the things I brought up last time regarding Firewise landscaping, tips and stuff. I think the blurb really kind of captures probably that middle ground, because obviously some things like, home ignition zone and defensible spaces is ultimately in conflict with a lot of the things we're trying to achieve here. So I think just the educational aspect of it is really helpful to inform people.
I think side
Go
comment on
ahead,
that?
yeah.
So with the defensible space, it might be appropriate to have more specific fire-wise material for what's called the wildland urban interface. So that's that like area where it's like more of the mountainous areas of Berthoud that are more different terrain, different plant material that's more fire. It's more susceptible to wildland fires. It might be appropriate to have documentation for those developments that are building in those areas. Like, even near the golf course would be considered the wildland urban interface of Berthoud, where there's more high risk of wildland fires instead of the in-town. Is that?
I thought there was a fire landscaping section here.
There is a
There was
blurb
a
on
blurb, yeah.
page 10, and it also has the Colorado State link, which goes in depth on it. I thought it was maybe a worthwhile discussion if we wanted more than that. I feel like that kind of captures what we need for our town, I guess, versus, if we were, 10, 20 miles to the west.
Sure.
But I'd be open to, any additional information if you guys feel this is enough on the fire aspect. Maybe it is, but I feel like it's important to get the educational aspect in here to inform people. But as for codifying it, I don't know if that's necessarily appropriate. I think it conflicts too much with what we're trying to achieve with landscape design here, like an urban, landscape. So
I'd appreciate maybe more conversation with staff on the wildland urban interface areas and development that goes into those specifically, and how we could work with the fire district to implement different guidelines and standards for those developments. Because there is a designated zones of more hazardous areas in Berthoud. It's not necessarily in town limits, but within our growth management areas.
which is one of the goals of the comp plan, to create a wildfire plan at some point.
Yeah, and I do think, one of the things that we do, every new subdivision gets referred to the fire district for plan review. And so, like Chief Charles joined us just on Thursday for a TRC meeting we had, technical review committee. So we get, on each project, we interact with fire department, the fire district on that specific project. We don't talk about kind of the broader wildland urban interface. So I think those are good suggestions.
Okay. So I feel like that blurb kind of captures maybe that middle ground. Maybe we could have more information on that, maybe not. I'm pretty happy with it. Only other thing I wanted to bring up is overall, I'm very happy with the draft. I think I'm almost ready to approve it tonight from my perspective. But I honestly would really appreciate to see this in front of the tree committee, because we've got a lot of expertise there that I think could be tapped to add additional detail if they see any. We've got several master gardeners that, I'm sure would have more input on this. So I would like to table it pending the tree advisory committee taking a look at this. That would be my only comment.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think that would really help me out. I have a tough time calling this environmental just because I don't see the town taking any of the savings that we would over a traditional development and putting that back into the river. I see the benefits of having more anything that encourages more wildlife, more biodiversity, and I could see that in this, so it's not all just turf. It's a little heavy-handed for me. I think Trustee Murphy, your final comment would make me feel a lot better. I'm worried when we're saying drip is gonna be all right for trees. And I think for me, the final, resting point on that would be the tree committee. If they say that's fine, then I would really feel a lot better about tabling it to go into that. So I would agree with you on that.
We did have our town forester review the document, but if you guys want us to run it through the tree committee also.
It's, yeah.
The comments would be helpful.
I think it's, and even if they agree with our forester, which, I think he's great. I'm not saying he's doing anything wrong. It would also the other effect is they feel included in this too. But I guess, yeah, the rest of my points, I love the idea of giving guidelines. I love the idea of encouraging color. I've just seen this go south pretty hard, and I'm kind of worried where this goes. I do consider swales, like that's very environmental. It slows it down from just all hitting the river at once from stormwater, but it makes it kind of slow down, recharges the groundwater. So I'd feel better if this were tabled to go into the tree committee, but that's my final points too. So I guess I'll ask that, is anyone else supportive of Trustee Murphy's suggestion of tabling it until it goes to the tree committee? Or just voting on it now? There's no wrong answer.
Maybe fine, let the tree committee look at it.
Yeah, support that.
Okay. Anything you wanted to add about the fire condition?
No,
Okay,
I'm
okay. You're happy with
satisfied
the wording?
I'm very satisfied with the document overall. I think it hits the right notes on virtually everything, so.
Well, right on.
Sorry, point of order, do we have to move to table?
Yes.
So I don't think there's anything else. There's no really conditions placed on this before it goes to tree committee. So yeah, it would move to table until the tree, I guess the upcoming, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll move to table the draft landscape design guidelines pending review by the tree advisory committee in the near future.
All right, is there a second?
One second.
All right, Trustee Murphy has moved on this. Trustee Ayers has seconded. Is there any final discussion? Clerk, me a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Butler,
Yes.
trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Parsbeck.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for coming out again. Sounds like overall the document looks great. All right. So we can do reports now and then go into that afterwards, or do you want to potentially take action?
I don't think you need to take any action after tonight.
Okay. Let's roll right into reports. And we can let's see how this is laid out. We'll just start with Trustee Ayers.
The only thing I have is an invitation by the Port Committee for May 31st to do a tour of the town. I guess the committee's gonna get a BATS bus and drive around to some of the older parks and some of the newer ones and just kind of get a feel for how things are coming together and how things are looking around town. So
When was that, 25th, you say?
31st.
Oh, geez. When is this deadline? Was that the 25th? Okay. 31st is the actual tour. Okay, cool. Thanks.
And it's at 5 o'clock.
Oh, okay. All right. Trustee Butler?
I have nothing.
Okay. Trustee Hardy?
Nothing.
Trustee Albrecht?
I just wanted to ask staff if we have any updates on the redevelopment of Town Park.
Yes, the bids came in over budget, just like all the projects we bid the last 6 months. The project is approximately $1 million over budget, so we had a meeting with the apparent low bidder last week to talk about some value engineering opportunities. You know, the park was designed intensively, if I could put it that way. And we think we can save quite a bit of money just by, you know, instead of 46 benches and picnic tables, installing 23 benches and picnic tables. I don't think it affects the overall usability of the park. You know, some things like that. Obviously, the splash pad is it's a very expensive component. It's about 40% of the overall cost of the project. So we're looking at some ways to kind of bring that down. And we're working with their pool installation team and their pool designers to reevaluate that as well. So our hope and the target that we're working for is to bring that to you on June 13th with some suggested revisions to the plan and with some agreed upon cost reductions with the expectation that we'd be able to do it within our approved budget or maybe with a very small increase rather than a 20% increase.
I appreciate that. I look forward to seeing the the new concepts, even if there's reductions, I think we're ready
Yeah,
to
I
see
mean, you know,
something.
I think from my perspective, we went through and did a value engineering exercise before we went to bid, because our cost estimate went from 4 million to 8 million, based on, you know, the basically double in construction costs that we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months. So we went through with the design team and made some, you know, what I would call value engineering decisions prior to. It's still a very nice park. But, you know, there's some really high dollar items in there that are even more than we expected. You know, as a good example, there's some laser cut metal screens that would be installed with some of the pergolas that are just really aesthetic. Those are like $120,000. So those come off the top, right? Things like that. There's some real easy value engineering decisions. The others, you know, we sat down we just unrolled the plans and said, hey, look, we're planning on adding 126 trees to the park. I think we can live with 70 new trees. It's already really heavily treed park anyway. So, you know, like going through and trying to find intelligent places where we can take those out that don't impact, you know, don't require a change in the irrigation design and things like that, but still provide shade in the appropriate locations. You know, the fire pit concept was cool. I think those are things that are unnecessary expenses. You know, so trying to go through and say, what are the things we think we could live without? Can we bring that down the cost sufficiently to do the project within budget or with a minor increase in budget? And then we'll come bring that to you the first meeting in June. That's our goal. So, but some of that will be dependent on the contractor will likely have to go back to their subs and try to, you know, they're gonna have to adjust their bid prices based on some of the reductions that we'd like to see. And then we'll propose both. If you wanna build the full thing, we could. But I think we'll still have an incredible park. What we don't wanna do is take away from the major features, the playground, the splash pad, the gathering spaces. But you know, perimeter landscaping, if there's 4 trees instead of 8, I don't know that will practically make any difference. I don't know that anybody would ever know the difference when they went through the park. It'd be significantly heavier landscaped than it is today, even with half the amount of landscaping that was in the budget. So, you know, those kinds of details.
Yeah, and I appreciate that warning that it will look different than maybe how we've seen it in the past, but
I'll be honest, if I showed you the plan that we modified versus the plan that we've shown you in the past, I don't think you would know the difference. So,
well, and I think just speaking on behalf of like a lot of the community, especially the parents that missed the pool and their kids played that park, they just want a cleaned up place they can be proud of to hang out in.
We do
It's
too.
really
The
not as
park
much
looks
about
awful.
the flair, the fanciness as much as we want somewhere where our kids can be safe to play and we can mingle and gather with our neighbors in a central location that's just clean and updated and not so run down. It's a place we can be proud of or for real estate agents that are showing off the town, like here's, you know, town park. So I
we would
appreciate
expect it to
any
be of the same quality
any
and
cutback
attractiveness
that
as
just
Wagner. Right?
gets it done.
That's what we're shooting for.
Awesome.
Turf grass.
What was that?
Does it have turf grass?
It sure does.
Okay.
A whole bunch of it.
I was looking forward to that, whatever, I'm the neighbor anyways. I'm looking forward to the fire pit. How do you guys figure about doing that to the public?
I think the fire pit is super cool.
Yeah.
It's just one of those that, you know, is it worth the expense in the context of the park?
It's so cool until you have a growing homeless population and then it becomes
I also worry about, you know, the idea of a button activated gas fire pit works really well in a controlled environment like at a hotel. In a public environment, I had concerns about it to begin with, so maybe that was why it was easy for me to be like, hey, it's probably not worth the, you know, $60,000 it costs to run gas lines and build all that.
You know, despite me, I think all my neighbors would agree with you, and they
And
just
then
probably don't
there'd
want
be kids
traffic.
out there
on the
melting
edges.
marshmallows into this gas fire pit, and you know, it'd just be kind of a mess. But anyway,
So just one other thing I wanted to just bring up as far as just something I'm thinking about, but from the beginning of my time as trustee, my heart was always, how can we take care of what we have and do that well first? And we talked a lot about trees and sidewalks and greenery, and I want to just bring up the concept of what can we do as a town to financially and feasibly invest in some of those things as the town. Like how do we replace trees? or create a replacement program or create programs where we can send out landscapers that help people with water-wise landscaping. And we invest as a town in making our community look better so that it's not just on the homeowner, it's on us because we're providing that. People want, like our guest stated, there's so much cost for people, but if the town can find ways to work with certain groups that if it's more bulk driven, that we're doing more for more people, maybe the cost comes down for the town. I don't know where that funding comes from or if there's a mechanism where we could drive funds to something like that. But it's something that is on my mind a lot of how we can beautify things without such expense to homeowners and to come alongside them.
Are we still pushing on the tree, a nursery at all, or did that stall?
We already have a nursery.
No, the new one, there's gonna be moved by Roberts Lake.
Oh, that one we're not prioritizing. The nursery we have now is kind of sufficient for what we need.
We got,
It's kind of a
because
longer term.
our last forester said it was getting depleted, it's back.
Yeah, we're refreshing stock through there. And we do have a lot of the programs you're talking about. I think maybe the question is are we investing enough? I mean, we're spending about $500,000 on sidewalk replacement this year. We have money for sidewalk cost share outside of the areas that we're prioritizing. So if folks want to replace their sidewalks, we have the ability to pay for half. We've invested a lot of money in Resource Central programs the last couple of years for Garden in a Box. Those sell out every year, where you get for a very low cost relative to the amount of stuff you get a whole kind of garden in a box that you can replant in existing beds or where you take out turf. We fund a turf replacement program, so each homeowner can qualify for $1,000 to go towards a turf replacement. It doesn't cover an $11,000 front yard, but I don't know if the town should be paying $11,000 to replace somebody's front yard anyway. And we actually, one of the updates I was gonna give you tonight, I think we mentioned this previously, but we did get a grant from the Colorado Water Conservation Board to put another $25,000 into that lawn replacement program, because there's a long waiting list.
Yeah, that was in your email too, that's great.
So,
Good job.
so, we do have some of those kinds of programs. I think those are things that certainly when we get to budget, I think it's important we talk about, where does the board want to prioritize funding? And if we want to increase funding into those kinds of programs and projects, we can.
Definitely, I would love to see a push of those programs and an increase at certain junctures, but I'm not sure when that is or how. Just
Well, there's
something
certainly
to
demand. I mean,
think
we have
about.
waiting lists for a lot of those programs. And so we may want to choose to increase funding to expedite some of those waiting lists.
That's good to know. Thank you. That's all I have.
Awesome. Trustee Murphy, you wanna move to bring us past 9:30?
Yeah, I will. I'll move to extend the meeting until or before 10:30.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that's approved. Trustee Murphy.
Throwing me. I was just gonna tack on to that. There were some discussions about a tree purchase program through a wholesaler that we've talked about in the advisory committee. What that's looking like right now is a possibility in 24 this year. So we'll have more to talk about, but I think the tree committee wants to kind of do a trial pilot with that.
That's great.
So something to look forward to next year. As for what I wanted to bring up, we've got a joint meeting with Port on June 26th for the tree advisory committee to kind of go over things. And then aside from that, went out to the cemetery last weekend, I want to say. And it actually was looking pretty good. I was very impressed with most of it. One thing I was going to bring up that was notable is we've got a lot of sunken graves in the older section. And as for filling those in, would that be on us as a responsibility?
I don't think so. That came up, obviously with the one of the recent emails we received. I don't know that I have the answer to that yet.
Okay.
Sounded like, I talked to Keith at the breakfast, it sounded like it's on the grave owner, that's considered part of their parcel?
That's my expectation as well, but I don't know, I just don't know that we've
Yeah, Keith
finalized that answer, but that would have been our normal
And that-
response.
and
Keith
then-
stated that it's responsible of the plot owner. Unless it's a safety issue, then they'll intervene and remedy it.
Cause those trees apparently are too, cause they were gifts, but the ones that have ips so bad, we had to take them out, so
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And they, you know, they own the plot and we maintain, you know, the ground. But yeah, from our perspective, it's their responsibility to adjust or modify or enhance those headstones.
Thanks for bringing that up, Sean, though, cause I've heard that a bunch.
Well, in addition to that, we kind of discussed that the other week at tree committee. But talking about stumping some of those existing ones, yeah, just looking at where some of those are located, I don't know how you actually bring the equipment in without disturbing headstones and stuff, so. Yeah, but overall, I thought it was looking pretty good. It was last week, you know. Obviously, there's areas of improvement, but certainly something we should continue to talk about.
Trustee Murphy, I apologize.
Go ahead.
For some of the trees that you said possibly needed to be stumped, would it be, from going out there to visit, would it be possible to maybe cut those trees and make artwork, like what happened with the park?
I'm more referring to all the trees that have actually already been taken. They've
Oh,
been
okay,
taken
to-
down
to
to
stump
just
those,
like,
not- okay.
6 inches above the ground.
Okay.
And I don't know how you grind those out because the location on some of those is just almost
It's pretty
impossible.
challenging, yeah.
Big bird bath.
You know,
Stump rock.
but the last thing I was gonna ask about, how's the sidewalk program going so far?
The project that we have underway,
Yeah.
really well. Keith touched base with all the homeowners that had flagstone within our existing project boundaries.
Mhm.
I think my understanding from him, I don't wanna quote him wrong, but every one of the ones he talked to that had already said they wanted their flagstone replaced, didn't want us to leave it. They all said, we want it gone, or several of them said, we wanna keep it, we're gonna use it for patios or whatever, which we told people they could have the flagstone and keep it.
Mhm.
I think he said there was only one homeowner that said, well, if the town's gonna pay for it, maybe I would have it re-leveled. A couple of the homeowners did say they had reached out to try and get bids to get it replaced and multiple landscape outfits they'd reached out to or concrete companies said, we won't touch it.
It is so hard. I have this issue.
Yeah.
They've come out and they say, oh, we'll break it. And I say, well, either break it or it's gotta get removed anyways.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, call me. And other guys have looked, there's just for some reason, no one, even the mudjackers, this guy literally called mudjack something out of Loveland, said, I won't do those.
Yep, and I think that's generally been the case, is that contractors don't wanna touch it, cause they know how hard it is to move it without breaking it, and they don't wanna be responsible for breaking it, and two, they don't wanna do the work and it not be level and then be on the hook for it forever, cause it's gonna settle or it's not gonna stay right, and it's not gonna meet ADA guidelines, and so it seems to be anyway, that a lot of the feedback we got even from the residents said, hey, we already tried to get this repaired and nobody would touch it, or like one person said, I'll do it, but it'll be $12,000, which is one of those like, sure, if I'm gonna make an enormous amount of money on it, I'll touch it, but otherwise, no thanks. And so that's been kind of a struggle. But we, in parallel with that, we're talking about some modifications of the sidewalk cost share program. My concern is if it really is, you know, this is hearsay from homeowners, right? We haven't gone through this exercise yet, but if it is true that, you know, the bid for replacing or repairing, you know, a fairly small section of sidewalk is like $12,000, that would be significantly more expensive than replacing with concrete. And so we'd have to decide under, you know, is that something the town wants to cost share and under what condition? But the way the cost share program is written, you're required to get bids that the town reviews before we agree to pay for it anyway, so that we can confirm that like the concrete is in line with what we typically pay for concrete, and it's not some exorbitant number. But we would expect to do the same thing with flagstone replacement, so.
Is there any like historic grants we could pursue? Because a lot of those houses that have those are usually, those have been there a very long time, those pavers. And so they are historic in nature, which add to the character. So are
There might be, I don't know. That's a good question.
Maybe we could ask Tracy. Mark, History Colorado.
It'd be nice to know because I think it adds to the character. But if it's cost prohibitive, but even with, I know, like even for myself, like thinking about replacing with concrete, if I ever plant new trees, which I'm going to have to at some point, it's gonna impede the concrete too. And I'm gonna replace it again. So no matter what, it feels like as a homeowner with tree lawns, you're going to be repairing these sidewalks more than once, probably in your lifetime if you're there long enough.
If you're there for an extended period of time, that's probably the case. And then, the reality is that's true of all home ownership, right? You're replacing and maintaining stuff everywhere, not just the sidewalk, right? You gotta paint your house, you gotta replace your roof. You gotta replace landscaping that dies. I mean, you don't have to, but if you wanna keep a nice place.
You don't want
And so the same is true, the sidewalk is just part of the deal, right? So hopefully rock that's installed properly, that makes it through its warranty period, should last a long time. And even tree root, tree root growth that might impact the sidewalk should not happen for a decade or more,
I appreciate you guys exploring, asking neighbors how they feel, and if there are neighbors who want to keep their flagstone, and if there is some sort of historic way that we can help them preserve that. I think that adds to the character of the community.
Yep.
I'm good. I'm done.
I agree with all those statements too, and Administrator Kirk, to your point, I know what you said is correct as far as the homeowners trend, but I think we could keep looking, at least I'll keep looking.
Yeah, and we're still evaluating some other alternatives too.
I know Tim.
There's not a lot of good examples out there.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, unique thing. Granted, I only looked in Loveland and Longmont, I didn't call out to Denver or anything. Just want to say thank you. Oh, Aaron's gone, but New Freedom Church again, that the first suicide training in the library had 0 attendees. Switching it over to New Freedom at 6, and it was just a great hour and a half. I think it was actually 2 hours. So really thankful for them, and hopefully we can keep these trainings going throughout the year, try new locations and times and in person versus Zoom. But yeah, it is really, really helpful and free. I will have other updates, but front range passenger rail MPO, all those are coming up. Behavioral health, we have next month. We started only doing those quarterly. So that will conclude my reports. Go for staff.
I'm gonna send you guys an update email tomorrow morning, but and this will be included. But since Mayor Pro Tem Grace is not here, I'm gonna mention it because I know it's important to him, and then I can tease him about the fact that he didn't get to hear it. But we did get an answer from CDOT about the crossing at Mountain, the railroad crossing at Mountain. The short answer is they did program funding to improve the crossing. CDOT now has to enter into a cost sharing agreement with the railroad, and they said that's likely going to take 3 months or more. And then after that's done, it'll be at least a month before they start construction. Depending on timing, that might push them into winter, and who knows when they will decide to replace it. But they are moving forward. They did program money to make the replacement. It is possible it can be done by the end of the year. But
great job.
That is good news.
That's like
timing,
the best news.
Yeah,
CDOT
that's-
timing is what it is. So
That is
so there's
good
good news,
news.
but it's not going to happen fast. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
So anyway, that was the only thing I was gonna mention. That and scheduling. So just a reminder that we are planning to have a study session next Tuesday. I sent out an email about that. I know not everybody responded, so if you cannot be there, please let me know. Just so that we can make sure that it's that we have enough that it's worth it. But we'll be reviewing the water and wastewater master plans, those drafts, and kind of giving you an update about what we've seen through that process and where the future looks like for our water, wastewater treatment and distribution systems. And then we're still planning to do a study session on June 20th with CIRSA on some kind of quasi-judicial proceeding training and board governance training stuff. And then we will, I spoke to Mayor Karspek about this last week, and I think we will not have a meeting on June 27th, which would be our normal second meeting. of the month. That's the week of CML, so we'll have several staff members out and a couple of trustees at the CML conference. So from an internal calendaring standpoint, that works for staff. We only had one item that I think we can move. That shouldn't be hard, that we were planning for, but just so that you know, we're planning not to have a meeting on June 27th. So study sessions next Tuesday and on the 20th of June, and no meeting on the 27th. That's it for me.
All right, Attorney Smith?
I have nothing, Your Honor.
Well, I figured out one big one, and is congratulations to trustee, formerly trustee Sorcelli, now trustee Albrecht. Not a great guy, and very happy for you, so.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a very birthed wedding. It was at the Foursquare Church and at Brookside, and then the Model Ts, we got escorted, and it was just very small town. It's like a Hallmark movie. Yeah, thank you.
Now plans for Hawaii, apparently.
Congratulations.
Get it in the budget.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, is there anything else, board? Otherwise, does anyone want to move us into executive session?
Doesn't sound like it.
What happens if no one does? You just walk off?
Enter into an executive session, CRS section 24-6-402-4E1 to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing a strategy for negotiations, and instructing in negotiators.
All right, thank you. Trustee Ayers has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Murphy is seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Butler,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes?
trustee Hardy,
Yeah.
trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Derek.
Yes, excellent.